7 weeks after my wedding, my mother's resort partnership was dead. My sister had quit the company she had spent most of her adult life helping my mother build, and my father had finally stopped pouring retirement money into it. My mother blamed me for all three things. According to her, everything could have been saved if I had signed one simple statement and agreed that what happened around my honeymoon had been nothing more than a family misunderstanding. I refused. By then, I knew there had been nothing accidental about it, but none of that was where the story started. It started on my wedding night, with my 32-year-old sister standing beside a cake she had not paid for, holding the knife that was supposed to be in my hand. Before I take you back to that cake table, I hope you're doing well today, and I hope you'll stay with me, because that first slice turned out to be the smallest part of what my family had planned. If you enjoy stories about family boundaries, betrayal, and consequences, subscribe to the channel and stay with us to see how this one unfolded. My name is Erin Whitaker, and on Saturday, June 13th, I married Adam Pierce at a venue near Newport Beach, California. I was 38, Adam was 40, and neither of us had wanted a wedding built around impressing people we barely knew. We invited about 90 guests, paid for the wedding ourselves, and spent more than a year saving for it. That mattered to me, not because I wanted credit, but because I had grown up in a family where money was often treated as a quiet form of authority. Adam and I wanted one day where every decision belonged to us. For most of that day, we got it. The ceremony was beautiful without being theatrical. My father walked me down the aisle without making a speech halfway there. My mother, Diane, cried at the appropriate moments and managed not to rearrange anything after the coordinator told her the schedule was locked. My younger sister, Mallory, wore the dress we had agreed on and smiled through family photographs. If you had watched us from across the room, you would have seen exactly the kind of polished family my mother had always liked presenting to the world. That should have warned me. My mother had built a career around weddings. She knew better than anyone how much a picture could hide. By the time dinner ended, I had relaxed enough to believe the hard part was over. Adam and I had finished our toast, danced with our families, and made it through the usual parade of relatives asking when we were going to have children, even though we had barely been married for an hour. The cake stood near the dance floor, 3 simple white tiers with flowers that matched my bouquet. Nothing extravagant, nothing designed for social media. I remember thinking it looked exactly like something Adam and I would have chosen, which was probably why I felt so protective of the moment that followed. The photographer motioned us toward the cake table. Adam touched the small of my back, and we started walking over together. Then my mother stepped in front of us. She was smiling, not nervously, not apologetically, but with that bright hostess smile she used whenever she had already made a decision and wanted everyone else to behave as though they had been included in it. She reached for Mallory's wrist and pulled her closer to the cake. "Just one little thing first," she said. "Let your sister have the first slice." A small gift. For a second, I genuinely thought I had misunderstood her. Mallory was already beside the cake. My mother put the knife in her hand. A few guests laughed because they assumed there was a joke coming. Others went quiet. I saw my aunt lower her champagne glass without drinking from it. The photographer looked at me instead of Mallory, waiting for some signal about what he was supposed to do. Adam didn't move. He looked at me, and that was one of the reasons I married him. He knew the difference between supporting me and making my decisions for me. Mallory pushed the knife through the bottom tier. She cut a neat wedge and lifted it onto a plate as though this had been scheduled all along. My mother clapped once and said, "There." Was that so terrible? I felt heat rise along my neck, but it wasn't embarrassment. It was anger, sharp and clean. Before I could answer, my father moved closer to me and said quietly, "Don't make a scene." It was a sentence I had heard in different forms my entire life. Mallory could create the situation. Mom could arrange it, Dad could minimize it. Somehow my reaction was always the thing most likely to become the problem. I looked at him and said, "I'm not." Then I stepped past him, took the knife from Mallory's hand, and looked at our photographer. "Let's do ours now," Adam joined me without asking whether I was all right in front of everyone. He simply put his hand over mine, we cut our own slice, and the photographer got the picture we had actually paid him to take. A few people applauded with obvious relief. Someone made a joke from the back of the room, and the tension broke enough for the reception to move on. Mallory set her plate down and disappeared toward our parents' table. That was the first choice I made that night that my family did not understand. They thought I stayed quiet because I had accepted what happened. I stayed quiet because I refused to give them the rest of my wedding. I had spent too much money, too much time, and too much emotional energy creating that evening with Adam to turn it into an argument about Mallory. I danced. I talked to our guests. I ate the cake she had cut into before us. I even smiled in photographs, although not because I had forgiven anyone. I had simply decided that anger did not get to choose my schedule. There was one detail I barely noticed at the time. Our videographer, a man Adam and I had hired independently, had been standing a few feet from the cake table with the red recording light on. My mother leaned toward him before Mallory made the cut and said something like, "Get Mallory in frame first." I heard it, but it registered as another example of Mom trying to direct a professional who did not work for her. She had been doing that all afternoon. I gave the videographer an apologetic look, and he gave me the tiny shrug of someone who had dealt with mothers of brides before. Adam and I had paid extra for his package because it included the unedited camera archive along with the finished wedding film. Adam wanted the candid footage, the conversations around tables, and the moments no one posed for. At the time, I thought that was sentimental and a little unnecessary. 6 weeks later, I would be grateful he had insisted on it. But that night, the archive was just another item buried somewhere in our wedding contract, and my mother's comment about getting Mallory into frame meant almost nothing to me. We stayed until most of the guests had left. While Adam was thanking his parents near the entrance, I went into the bridal room to change my shoes and make sure we had everything we needed for our flight to Maui on Monday morning. My feet hurt, my hair had started falling out of its pins, and for the first time all day, I was alone long enough to feel how tired I actually was. Adam came in carrying my phone charger and asked whether I had downloaded our Maui itinerary in case the airport Wi-Fi was bad. I told him I had, then added that my parents had a copy too because I had sent them our travel PDF a couple of weeks earlier for emergencies. He gave me a look. The whole thing? Flights, resort, dates, the basics. He nodded and didn't make anything of it. Neither did I. My parents were our emergency contacts. If something happened while we were traveling, I wanted someone back home to know where we were supposed to be. It was such an ordinary decision that I forgot about the conversation almost immediately. Later, I would replay it and realize how many disasters begin with information you handed to someone because you never imagined they would use it against you. My phone rang before we left the bridal room. The number had a Hawaii area code. I almost let it go to voicemail because I was standing in a wedding dress with one shoe in my hand and the reception staff waiting to clear our things. Then I saw the resort name on the caller identification and answered. The woman introduced herself as a manager from the resort where Adam and I were scheduled to arrive Monday. Her tone was professional but careful. "I'm sorry to bother you on your wedding day," she said. "I need to clear up your Monday arrival." Adam heard enough to turn toward me. I put the phone on speaker. "What about it?" I asked. She confirmed my full name, then Adam's. She confirmed our arrival date. Everything sounded normal until she said, "You and Mr. Pierce are still the primary guests on the reservation, and the payment information has not been changed. The issue is with several service notes that were added to the booking." I stopped fastening my shoe. "What service notes?" There was a pause on the other end. "Your sister, Mallory Whitaker, has been associated with the suite arrival notes. Airport transfer instructions list Mallory Whitaker and Cole Bennett. The private dinner reservation also lists them." Adam stared at me. I said, "Remove them." The manager didn't argue. "We can correct the active itinerary. Before I do that, I need to verify something else. Were you expecting your sister and her husband to join you?" "No." "Were you transferring any portion of the stay to them?" "No." Did you authorize someone else to make changes on your behalf? No. I heard my own voice become calmer with every answer. That was how I handled problems at work. First establish what had happened, then establish what could still happen. Anger could wait until the system was secure. Has my reservation actually been transferred? I asked. No. You are still the primary guest and payer. Has anyone been added as an authorized guest? Not to the primary reservation. Have there been additional charges? Not at this time. Then please remove any active service instructions that were not made by me or my husband. Preserve whatever history you need internally. After that, I want a security phrase on the reservation, and I don't want any verbal changes accepted from a third party. The manager said she could do that. Adam leaned closer to the phone. And only Aaron or I can change anything from now on? Yes, I'll note that explicitly. I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. The honeymoon itself was still ours. Whatever my family had attempted to leave, they had not succeeded in taking the booking away from us. That mattered. It meant I was not standing there trying to win something back. I still had it. My next job was to make sure nobody touched it again. Then I asked the question that changed the rest of my wedding night. Who called you? The manager hesitated just long enough for me to know I was not going to like the answer. The caller identified herself as the mother of the bride. Adam closed his eyes. I didn't need clarification, but I asked anyway. Diane Whitaker? Yes. How did she get far enough to add those notes? She had your confirmation number and several details from the reservation. She said she was helping coordinate family arrangements and that you would confirm the changes later. I looked across the bridal room at my suitcase, my phone charger, my garment bag, the little folder with copies of our travel documents. For one irrational second, I pictured the PDF I had emailed my parents sitting in my mother's inbox. I dismissed the thought just as quickly. Lots of people knew where we were honeymooning. My mother worked in weddings. Maybe she had gotten details from something else. I didn't have enough information yet, and I wasn't going to invent an answer simply because I was angry. When did she call? I asked. The manager gave me the date. It had been several days before the wedding. That detail landed harder than the others. My mother had not watched Mallory cut my cake, seen me stay calm, and then impulsively decided I would probably give up my honeymoon too. Whatever she had done with that reservation had started before Mallory ever touched the knife. Please email me an incident summary, I said. Just the facts. When the notes were added, what they were, and what you've done tonight to secure the reservation. I will. And nothing changes without me or Adam. Understood. I thought the call was over. Then the manager said, "There's one more reason I wanted to reach you directly." I waited. The notes are unusually specific. They include arrival timing, dinner setup, and photo coverage. That's why I called instead of treating this as a normal family request. I looked at Adam again. His expression had changed. The anger was still there, but underneath it was the same question forming in my own mind. My mother had not simply asked a hotel to let Mallory use a reservation. Someone had been planning where Mallory would arrive, where she would eat, and where someone would photograph her. The manager promised to send the email and ended the call. For several seconds, the bridal room was quiet except for the muffled music coming through the wall. Adam finally asked, "What do you want to do?" I picked up my other shoe and slid it on. "First, we keep our honeymoon. And your mother?" I looked toward the door. My parents were still somewhere inside the venue. Mallory was too. I could have walked back into the reception and demanded answers in front of everyone. Part of me wanted to, but I had 6 pieces of information and about 60 questions, and I had already learned that my mother was comfortable acting first and explaining later. I wasn't going to copy her. "We talk to them tomorrow," I said. "Tonight, I want the rest of my wedding." Adam studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." I took his hand and walked back toward the music. At that point, I still thought the worst thing my family had tried to do was give my honeymoon to my sister. I had no idea why my mother cared about photo coverage in Maui, why Mallory and Cole had been listed for a dinner Adam and I had paid for, or why those arrangements had been made before anyone had asked me a single question. I only knew one thing for certain. My mother had expected me to confirm a plan after she had already put it in motion, and for the first time in my life, I had made sure the answer could not be supplied for me. I woke the next morning before 6, even though I had barely slept. Adam was still asleep beside me, one arm thrown across the empty half of the bed where I had been lying, and for a few seconds I stared at the ceiling, trying to remember why my chest felt tight. Then I saw my phone on the nightstand and remembered the resort manager's call. I reached for it without turning on the lamp. The email had arrived a little after midnight. The subject line was plain: Reservation Activity Summary. I sat up slowly and opened it. The resort had documented the dates and times when the service notes had been added, the categories affected, and the security measures placed on the reservation after my call. Nothing in the email said my suite had ever legally belonged to Mallory. Nothing said I had approved a transfer. The primary reservation had remained under my name and Adam's, exactly as the manager had told us. But several days before the wedding, someone identifying herself as my mother had called with my confirmation number and enough reservation details to sound credible. She had requested that Mallory Whitaker and Cole Bennett be noted for the airport transfer, suite arrival coordination, and private dinner, while saying I would personally confirm the final arrangements later. That wording bothered me more in daylight than it had the night before. It was not, my daughter asked me to call. It was not, the bride has authorized these changes. It was, essentially, put this in motion. She'll approve it afterward. My mother had built the entire request around the assumption that my consent was something she could obtain after everyone else had already started acting as if it existed. Adam stirred beside me. You reading the email? Yeah. He pushed himself up against the headboard and held out his hand. I gave him the phone. He read the summary once, then again more slowly. So she called before the wedding, several days before, and she knew enough to sound like she was coordinating for us. Apparently, he handed the phone back. What do you want to do first? I appreciated the question because it was a question. My parents rarely asked what I wanted once they had decided what the correct answer should be. I got out of bed, pulled on a robe, and crossed to the small desk near the window. I want to talk to Mom before she has time to turn this into something else. Adam checked the time. It's early. She'll be awake. He gave me a look that said he knew exactly how certain I was. My mother had been waking before sunrise for most of my life. First because she had children, later because she ran a wedding business and treated every unanswered email like a small fire. I called her. She answered on the second ring. Erin? Is everything all right? The concern in her voice was so immediate and polished that for half a second I almost laughed. No, I said. Why is Mallory on my honeymoon reservation? Silence. Not confusion. Silence. Then my mother exhaled, as if I had asked about something tedious. I was going to explain that today. When? After everyone had rested. Yesterday was your wedding. Exactly. Erin, don't start like this. I'm asking a question. You sound accusatory. Because you called my resort without asking me. I called to arrange something for your sister. Using my confirmation number. It wasn't some criminal act. You're making it sound sinister. I looked at Adam. He had gotten out of bed and was standing near the coffee machine, but he wasn't pretending not to listen. Why was Mallory listed for our suite? My mother lowered her voice. Because she and Cole need time together. I frowned. What does that have to do with my honeymoon? More than you know. Then tell me. Another pause. I could hear movement on her end, a cabinet opening, the clink of a mug. She was doing what she always did during uncomfortable conversations, turning them into something she could conduct while making coffee. Mallory and Cole have been having a difficult period. Your sister hasn't wanted everyone in her business, so I've respected that. You respected her privacy by putting her name on my hotel reservation? That's not fair. It is literally what happened. My mother clicked her tongue. You and Adam are solid. You have time. You have money. You can take another trip whenever you want. Mallory doesn't have that luxury right now. There it was. Not an apology. A calculation. I kept my voice level. Did you expect us not to go? I expected you to listen. That's not what I asked. Why do you always turn everything into an interrogation? Because you're not answering. She sounded sharper now. We thought once you understood the situation, you would want to help. Ve? My mother hesitated for less than a second, but I caught it. Your father and I. I sat down. Did Dad know you called the resort? Your father knew I was trying to help Mallory. That's another different answer. Aaron, this attitude is exactly why I didn't want to explain everything in the middle of the wedding. You didn't explain it before the wedding either, because you would have reacted before hearing the whole situation. I nearly smiled at that. You mean I might have said no before you made plans? You're twisting my words. No. I'm repeating the sequence. She started talking faster. She said Mallory was struggling. She said Cole was distant. She said family mattered more than one trip. She said I had always been the one who could handle disappointment better. Each sentence was packaged as praise, but I had heard versions of it my whole life. Aaron was responsible. Aaron was practical. Aaron would understand. Aaron could wait. Aaron didn't need as much, because Aaron could take care of herself. When I was younger, those descriptions had made me proud. By my 30s, I had started noticing that every compliment came with an invoice. Mom, I said, interrupting her. I need you to answer one thing. Did I ever tell you Mallory could have our honeymoon? No, but that's not. Did Adam? I don't know what conversations he had with your sister. I asked if he told you that. She went quiet again. Then the answer is no. Aaron, we were going to explain. After the flights were booked, that silence was longer. I stood. Mallory has flights? My mother immediately became defensive. Travel can be changed. When did you buy them? I didn't say I bought them. Who did? Why does that matter? Because you just told me you were going to explain something that was already booked. You are trying very hard to make this ugly. No, I'm trying very hard to understand how far you went before asking me. Adam stopped pouring coffee. My mother said, You know what? Call me when you're calmer. I'm calm. No, you're angry. Those aren't opposites. She hung up. I stared at the phone for a moment, not because I was shocked she had ended the call, but because I finally understood that my mother had no intention of starting from the same set of facts I was using. To her, the problem was not that she had arranged something without permission. The problem was that I was insisting permission mattered. Adam handed me coffee. How far did she get? Far enough that Mallory apparently has flights. He leaned against the desk. Do we know that for sure? No. Mom avoided saying who paid for them. Then don't fill in the blank. I looked at him over the rim of the mug. I know. He smiled slightly. I know you know. That was another reason he was good for me. He didn't treat being smart like protection against being emotional. I was angry enough to make assumptions, and he knew it. So did I. My father called less than 15 minutes later. Your mother is upset. Good morning to you too, Dad. Aiden. What? You know yesterday was a stressful day for everyone. It was my wedding. Exactly. Which is why I don't understand why we're starting the morning like this. I set my coffee down. Mom called my honeymoon resort before the wedding and put Mallory and Cole into the service notes. I know there was some discussion about helping your sister. Did you know she called the resort? I knew she was working on something. Did you know Mallory had travel plans? He sighed. Your mother mentioned flights. There was my answer. So when you told me not to make a scene at the cake table, you already knew Mom had plans for Mallory to go to Maui. Those were separate things. Are you sure? Of course I'm sure. Then, why was Mom arranging both? He went silent. I let him sit in it. One of my bad habits was rescuing other people from uncomfortable pauses. I used to ask a difficult question and then immediately soften it, rephrase it, offer them an easier version. That morning, I didn't. Finally, he said, Your mother thought Mallory needed something good, so she gave her something that belonged to me. Nothing had been finalized. Dad, there were flight plans and hotel notes. The hotel didn't actually transfer anything. That sentence caught my attention. How do you know that? Another pause. I said, Did Mom tell you about my call with the resort? She told me there had been confusion. Confusion would mean two people misunderstood the same conversation. There was no conversation. He made a frustrated sound. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. No, I'm keeping it exactly the size it is. Your mother's business has been under pressure. Mallory is dealing with things you don't know about. There are factors here beyond whether you got the room you wanted. I still have the room. Then what are we fighting about? I closed my eyes for a second. The fact that you think getting caught before you succeeded means nothing happened. Nobody was trying to steal from you. Then stop using that word. I didn't. What word? Steal. You did. He went quiet again. I continued. Adam and I are going to Maui tomorrow. The resort has secured the booking. Nobody else is authorized to touch it. If Mom wants to explain why Mallory was supposed to be there, she can explain it after I have the facts. Aaron, don't punish the whole family over one trip. I almost laughed. Who am I punishing? You know what I mean. No, I don't. I'm going on the honeymoon I paid for. Your sister is having a hard time. I can be sorry she's having a hard time without giving her my hotel room. He said my name in that disappointed tone parents sometimes use when they want you to feel 12 years old again. It didn't work. I'm going to call Mallory, I said. If there's something I need to know, she can tell me herself. I don't think that's a good idea. That's interesting. Why? Because last night everyone apparently thought it was fine to plan her trip using my reservation. This morning, suddenly I shouldn't speak to her. He did not answer that. He told me to enjoy the day, which was such an absurd closing line that I didn't respond. When the call ended, Adam looked at me and said, he knew more than he admitted. I know. Careful. I know. That's still an inference. Good. I gave him a tired smile. You're enjoying this way too much. I'm an engineer. I like when people distinguish evidence from assumptions. Romantic. It's why you married me. I called Mallory a little after 9. She didn't answer. 10 minutes later, she texted, asking if this was about Mom. I replied, it's about you being listed on my honeymoon. Call me when you're ready to answer direct questions. She called almost immediately. Why are you making this sound like I hacked your hotel? I didn't. Mom said you called her at dawn. I called her after the resort emailed me about changes she requested. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal. Then explain it. Mallory sighed. Cole and I need some time away. Okay. Mom thought the trip could help. My trip. Your reservation? Yes. No. My honeymoon. Aaron, you always do that. Do what? Turn wording into some moral trial. I could hear traffic in the background. Mallory was probably in a car. Though I didn't ask where. Did you think I had agreed? Mom said Adam understood. That stopped me. What does that mean? I don't know. She said she'd talked through the situation and that he understood why it mattered. Did she tell you Adam said yes? I don't remember the exact words. Did she tell you I said yes? Mallory did not answer. I waited. Finally, she said, I thought you were going to be okay with it. That's not what I asked. Why are you doing this? Because there's a difference between believing I'll be okay and knowing I agreed. Mom said you guys could take another trip. Mom doesn't get to spend my vacation. Nobody said she did. Then why were you preparing to use it? Her breathing changed. I could hear the anger now. You don't know what's going on with me and Cole. You're right. Because you haven't told me. I didn't want everyone discussing my marriage. I wasn't discussing your marriage. I was planning mine. That landed. She went quiet. I softened my voice, but not the question. Mallory, did Mom tell you that Adam and I had offered you our honeymoon? She said it was being worked out. With whom? I don't know. Did you ask? Another silence. That answer bothered me more than if she had simply lied. Mallory had not needed certainty. She had needed enough ambiguity to take what was being offered without asking who had actually offered it. Are you flying to Maui tomorrow? I asked. I was supposed to. With Cole? Yes. Who booked the flights? Mom handled it. There it was. Does Cole believe Adam and I gave you the trip? I don't know what Cole believes. You were going to fly across the Pacific with him tomorrow. You didn't discuss where the trip came from? Mom explained it. Then what did she tell him? I don't know, Erin. Her voice broke slightly, but I didn't rush in to comfort her. I knew my sister well enough to know she sometimes cried when cornered and sometimes cried because she was genuinely hurt. Both could be true at once. I am sorry things are bad with Cole, I said. I mean that. But you are not staying in our suite. You are not using our transfer. You are not using our private dinner. Those plans belong to me and Adam. You don't have to say it like I'm trying to take your husband. I didn't. You always act like I'm some disaster you have to manage. That hit somewhere more personal, because there was truth inside it. I had spent years assuming Mallory would create chaos and Mom would clean it up. I rarely wondered who had taught Mallory that chaos would be cleaned up for her. But understanding that didn't change what was happening. I'm not managing you, I said. I'm telling you what I will and won't allow. She ended the call without saying goodbye. I didn't chase her. The next message came to Adam, not me. He was packing a pair of shoes when his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, frowned, then handed it to me. It was from Cole. Thanks again for helping us out. I know this is weird. Mallory said your family worked something out. I didn't want to reach out during the wedding, but I appreciate it. I read it twice. Adam sat on the edge of the bed. I never told him anything. I know. What do you want me to say? The truth. Nothing more. He typed slowly enough that I could see the words before he sent them. Erin and I did not offer our honeymoon. We are still traveling tomorrow. I think you should talk to Mallory about what you were told. He showed it to me. Send it. Cole didn't respond right away. For the first time all morning, I put my phone down. Adam and I went downstairs, had breakfast, and spent an hour opening wedding cards. I needed that hour. Not because I wanted to pretend nothing was wrong, but because I refused to let the problem occupy every available space simply because my mother had created it. We laughed over a card from Adam's college roommate. We found a note from my aunt that made me cry for a completely different reason. We talked about Maui. We checked our passports even though we had already checked them twice. My mother called again just before noon. I considered ignoring it, then answered. What did Adam say to Cole? She demanded. No hello this time. The truth. You embarrassed your sister. How? Now Cole is questioning everything. He should ask Mallory. You had no right to interfere in their marriage. I almost dropped the phone. You put them on my honeymoon. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid. What? Everyone reacting before they understood the plan. I walked toward the window, then explained the plan. My mother exhaled hard. Mallory and Cole were supposed to fly out tomorrow, have a few quiet days, and come back with some breathing room. That is all. In our room, it was already paid for. By me. Erin, listen to yourself. You have a stable career. Adam has a stable career. You both travel. Mallory is dealing with the collapse of her marriage and trying to help me keep the business moving. You really want to make this about who paid for dinner? I stopped at the phrase collapse of her marriage. Mallory had told me things were bad. Mom had just made them sound much worse. You said, keep the business moving. What does the business have to do with my honeymoon? My mother answered too quickly. Nothing. I'm saying she's under pressure from several directions. I filed that away. Then I asked, when did you book their flights? She did not answer. Mom? A few days ago. Before my wedding. Yes. Before asking me. We were going to talk. After you bought plane tickets? They were changeable. That's not the point. It's exactly the point. Nobody was trapping you. Then why make plans before I agreed? Her voice went cold. Because I thought when you understood what was at stake, you would act like her sister. There was nothing to say to that which would improve the conversation. I'll talk to you after Maui, I said. You're still going? The surprise in her voice was almost insulting. Yes. What about Mallory and Cole? What about them? There was a pause. Then my mother said, Fine. Do whatever you want. I almost answered, That's what a honeymoon usually is. But there was no point. I ended the call. Adam was standing in the doorway watching me. She really thought we might cancel, he said. Or give it to them. His phone buzzed. Cole. This time the message was longer. I watched Adam read it. His face changed slowly, from confusion to concern. What? I asked. He handed me the phone. Cole had written that Mallory told him the trip was supposed to be a chance for them to reconnect. Diane had said Aaron and Adam understood why they needed it, and that everything had been arranged. Cole said he would not have agreed to go if he had known we were still taking the trip. Then came the final line. If you two never offered it, then what exactly did Diane promise us? Adam and I did not answer Cole's question because we didn't have an answer. We told him only what we knew for certain. We had never offered the honeymoon. We were still flying to Maui in the morning, and the resort had removed the unauthorized service notes. Cole replied that he understood, then stopped messaging. I spent the rest of Sunday resisting the urge to call Mallory again. She had already given me one useful piece of truth without realizing it. Mom had told her Adam understood. Cole had been told something even stronger, that everything had been arranged. The stories were close enough to sound consistent until you put them next to each other. By Monday morning, my mother had sent me a message long enough to qualify as a letter. I read the first few lines while Adam and I waited at the airport. She said she was disappointed that I had involved Cole before giving the family a chance to explain. She said Mallory had barely slept. She said I had taken a fragile situation and made it worse because I was focused on technicalities instead of people. Then she reminded me that she had spent my entire life trying to make things easier for both of her daughters. I stopped reading before I reached the end. Adam looked over from the seat beside me. You want to cancel? I turned toward him. The flight? The trip. If you're going to spend the whole week dealing with this, we can go somewhere later. I stared at him for a second because the question irritated me, not because he had asked it, but because for the first time I understood how completely my family had expected that outcome. They had counted on the possibility that once enough discomfort surrounded the honeymoon, I would stop wanting it. Mom had created the pressure. Dad had minimized it. Mallory had prepared to benefit from it. If I canceled now, nobody would technically have taken the trip from me, but they still would have succeeded in making it unusable. Why would I give them the trip after I already got it back? I asked. Adam smiled, but there was relief behind it. That's the answer I was hoping for. I put my phone on airplane mode before boarding. The flight gave me several hours where no one in my family could reach me, and I was surprised by how quickly my body noticed. My shoulders loosened. I slept for part of the trip. Adam watched a movie I had no interest in and kept handing me pretzels without looking away from the screen. Every so often I thought about the resort notes, or my mother's call, or Cole's question. But I stopped myself from building theories out of information I did not have. I knew Mom had called. I knew Dad had known something was being arranged. I knew Mallory had expected to fly to Maui. I did not yet know why photo coverage had been included or what my mother's business had to do with any of it. When we landed, the air hit me first. Warm, humid, softer than Southern California. I stood outside the terminal with Adam, while drivers held signs and families reorganized luggage around us. For the first time since the cake table, something inside me felt uncomplicated. We were in Maui. We had arrived. The trip had not disappeared because my mother wanted it for someone else. Our driver found us under the correct names: Aaron Whitaker and Adam Pierce. No Mallory, no Cole. I watched him confirm the reservation on his tablet, and I hated how much satisfaction I got from something so ordinary. The resort had done exactly what I had asked. The active itinerary was ours again, clean and simple. The photographer appeared while the driver was helping load our bags. He was standing a few yards away with a camera case over one shoulder and a phone in his hand. He looked at the couples coming out of the terminal, checked his screen, then approached us with the cautious expression of someone trying to match people to a description. "Mallory and Cole?" he asked. I stopped. Adam looked at me. "No," I said. "Aaron and Adam." The photographer immediately stepped back. "Sorry. Wrong couple." He looked at his phone again, then toward the driver. I might have let him walk away if he had not said Mallory's name. Instead, I asked, Are you waiting for Mallory Whitaker and Cole Bennett? His eyes came back to me. Yes, I'm Mallory's sister. That did not make him more comfortable. I was told they were arriving this afternoon, he said carefully. Who told you? I'm freelance. I got a call sheet from a coordinator. What are you supposed to be photographing? He hesitated. Arrival coverage, a few resort shots, couple content. Adam stepped closer, not aggressively, just enough to become part of the conversation. For what company? The photographer checked the top of his call sheet. Ever After Whitaker. I felt the strange, hollow sensation that comes when a fact lands before your emotions catch up to it. My mother's company. Do you have our names anywhere on that sheet? I asked. He scrolled. No. Mallory Whitaker and Cole Bennett. Is our reservation number on there? I don't have reservation numbers. Good. At least one line had not been crossed. I asked what dates he had been booked for. He named Monday through part of Wednesday. That was all I needed. I'm sorry you came out here for nothing, I said. Mallory and Cole aren't arriving. He looked genuinely confused. Should I contact the coordinator? Yes. Whoever hired you. I did not ask to see his contract. I did not ask him to send me his call sheet. It was not mine. I had learned something useful without pretending I had a right to every piece of paper connected to it. When we got into the car, Adam closed the door and waited until the driver pulled away from the curb. Couple content, he said. Ever After Whitaker. So your mother wasn't just sending them on vacation? No. I looked back through the rear window. The photographer was still standing near the terminal, phone to his ear. Adam studied me. How much of today do you want to spend on this? The question irritated me again for about half a second. Then I understood why he was asking. Not all of it. Good. But I want to know what the resort knows. Also good. I leaned my head back against the seat. 1 hour. 1 hour? Today? We deal with whatever needs dealing with for 1 hour. After that, unless somebody is actively trying to change our booking again, I'm done. He held out his hand. Deal. I shook it. That rule became one of the smartest decisions we made on the trip. Without it, I would have turned our honeymoon into a private investigation funded by our own vacation budget. Every notification would have become a summons. Every meal would have become a strategy meeting. My family had already tried to take the trip from us once. I was not going to help them finish the job by making them the subject of every hour we spent there. The resort itself was exactly what we had saved for. Not absurdly extravagant, not some private island fantasy, but beautiful enough that I understood why Adam had pushed for the upgrade. Our suite overlooked the ocean. The balcony doors opened onto warm air and the sound of water below. There was a bowl of fruit on the table and a handwritten welcome card with our names spelled correctly. I read the card twice, just because I could. We unpacked before making any calls. Adam changed clothes and opened the balcony doors. I put my wedding ring on the dresser while I washed my face, then slipped it back on before we went downstairs. That small act mattered more than I expected. My marriage was real. My honeymoon was real. Nothing my mother had planned could change that. At the front desk, I asked whether the manager I had spoken with Saturday was available. She joined us a few minutes later in a small seating area off the lobby. Her name was Claire, and she looked relieved to see us rather than surprised. I wanted to make sure everything was correct when you arrived, she said. It is, I told her. Thank you. Then I explained what had happened at the airport. Claire's expression tightened slightly when I mentioned the photographer and Ever After Whitaker. That helps explain part of the internal confusion, she said. What confusion? She chose her words carefully. There had been a separate marketing inquiry associated with that company. It wasn't handled through reservations, which is why the service notes stood out when they appeared. Adam leaned forward. A marketing inquiry from Diane's company? Yes. I asked. Was my booking information used in it? Claire did not answer immediately. I can tell you what relates directly to your reservation. I can't provide you with another company's proposal or internal communications that aren't yours. That's fair. What I can confirm is that certain services, named in the inquiry, matched services already attached to your stay, closely enough that we reviewed the reservation activity. That's one reason you received the call Saturday. That was more useful than if she had simply handed me a folder. What services? I asked. Arrival transportation. Your suite category. A private dinner package. The same 3 things. I remembered the thumbnail-sized pieces of information from the original call. Mallory in the suite notes. Mallory and Cole on the airport transfer. Mallory and Cole at the dinner. At the time, they had looked like 3 separate attempts to use parts of our honeymoon. Now they looked like a sequence. Arrival. Suite. Dinner. A beginning, middle, and end. Was photo coverage mentioned? Adam asked. Claire gave a small nod. In connection with the marketing inquiry, yes. I felt my stomach tighten. Was my name in that proposal? I can't disclose the full proposal. But the couple identified for the proposed content was Mallory Whitaker and Cole Bennett. Not me. Not Adam. Mallory and Cole. Was ever after Whitaker proposing some kind of sponsored stay? I asked. Not exactly. The discussion was exploratory. Your mother's company had approached our marketing team about a possible content and referral partnership. Nothing had been finalized. That distinction mattered. My mother had not somehow convinced the resort to give Mallory a free luxury honeymoon. She had been pitching an idea, apparently using pieces of a stay I had already purchased to make the idea easier to execute. Would the partnership have made them a preferred planner? Adam asked. That was one of the possibilities being discussed if a trial went well. I understood enough about business to know what that could mean. A resort did not need to pay my mother's company millions for the opportunity to matter. If ever after Whitaker got onto a preferred vendor list for destination weddings, one successful referral could lead to another. For a boutique planning business, that kind of pipeline could be valuable. It also explained something my mother had said Sunday. Mallory was dealing with the collapse of her marriage and trying to help me keep the business moving. At the time, Mom had claimed those were separate pressures. I was starting to think they were the same problem. Claire said, "There's one additional issue you should know about before your dinner reservation tomorrow night." What? Your private dinner is secure under your name. However, an old production note was attached to the service file before Saturday's correction. Staff removed the active instruction, but the history remains in the record. What did it say? She checked the screen in front of her. Floral initials requested for the table. M and C. Adam sat back. I felt a wave of anger so sudden I had to let it pass before speaking. This was not a misunderstanding about who would use a room. Someone had planned details. Someone had imagined Mallory and Cole arriving, being photographed, walking into our suite, sitting at the private dinner Adam and I had booked, with their initials arranged in flowers. Please leave the history intact, I said. Claire nodded. We will, but keep the active reservation exactly as it is. Of course. I checked the time, 43 minutes. Adam noticed too. Anything else we need today? He asked me. I wanted to ask 20 more questions. I wanted to know who had written the proposal, who had contacted the photographer, what my father knew, whether Mallory had planned clothes for the shoot, whether Cole had known cameras were involved, but none of those questions threatened the reservation that afternoon. No, I said. Not today. Claire looked faintly surprised, then smiled. Enjoy your stay. We did. That afternoon, Adam and I went down to the beach. I left my phone in the room. We swam until my hair was full of salt, and the muscles in my shoulders finally stopped feeling like they were holding up a building. We ate lunch late and laughed because Adam ordered something spicy, after insisting he could handle anything on the menu, then spent 5 minutes pretending his eyes were watering because of the ocean breeze. For several hours, my family became what they should have been on my honeymoon. People who existed somewhere else. That evening, I checked my phone once. There were 7 messages from Mom, 3 from Mallory, 1 from Dad, and nothing from Cole. I opened none of them. The next morning, after breakfast, Claire emailed me asking whether I would be willing to speak briefly with a member of the resort's marketing team because they wanted to clarify which parts of the proposed campaign had overlapped with my reservation. Since it directly involved information tied to our stay, I agreed. The marketing coordinator met us in the lobby. She was younger than Claire and looked more embarrassed by the situation than anyone in my family had. "I want to be clear," she said. "We never had an executed partnership with Ever After Whitaker. We had an exploratory proposal under review." "I understand. And your reservation was never transferred to that company or to your sister." "I understand that too." She visibly relaxed. I asked one question first. "When was the proposal submitted?" She glanced at her notes. "Approximately 3 weeks ago." I thought I had heard her wrong. 3 weeks ago? Yes. My wedding had been Saturday. I counted backward automatically. 3 weeks meant my mother had been discussing Mallory and Cole at this resort before I walked down the aisle. Before Mallory cut my cake. Before my father told me not to make a scene. Before anyone in my family supposedly planned to explain the honeymoon situation to me, Adam asked. And the proposed couple was already Mallory and Cole? Yes. With the same general services Aaron had booked? The coordinator chose her wording carefully. The concept referenced a luxury arrival, couple accommodations, private dining, and photography. Some of those elements overlapped closely enough with your existing itinerary that, once reservations received the third-party requests, our teams flagged the inconsistency. I looked at her. So my mother's proposal existed before she called reservations. Based on the dates we have, yes. That was the moment the entire shape of the story changed. Until then, one explanation had remained possible, however insulting. Mom could have seen Mallory struggling, known Adam and I had a honeymoon planned, and impulsively decided that moving parts of our trip to Mallory would solve 2 problems at once. It would still have been wrong, but at least it would have been reactive. This was not reactive. The proposal came first. The content plan came first. The photographer came first. The assumption that Mallory and Cole would somehow end up occupying pieces of our honeymoon came before anyone asked whether I would surrender them. I thanked the coordinator and ended the meeting before our 1-hour limit was up. Outside the lobby, Adam and I walked toward the path leading to the beach. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, "You okay?" I looked toward the water. Yesterday I thought she had made plans because she assumed I'd agree. And now? Now I think agreeing was never part of the planning stage. He waited. I stopped walking and turned to him. "She didn't think I'd agree, Adam. She planned around me before she ever asked." The proposal date bothered me for the rest of the morning, not because it gave me an answer, but because it destroyed the easiest explanation. My mother had not seen an opportunity after the wedding and moved too quickly. She had been working toward something before I ever stood at the cake table. That changed the question, from why she had tried to give my honeymoon to Mallory, to how long she had been planning around a decision I had never made. Adam and I kept our 1-hour rule. After the meeting with the marketing coordinator, we stopped talking about my family, changed clothes, and spent the afternoon away from the resort. I wanted distance from every screen that contained my mother's name. By dinner, I had almost managed it. Then I caught myself staring at a menu without reading it because one phrase from the meeting kept circling in my head. Some of those elements overlapped closely enough with your existing itinerary. It sounded too precise to be coincidence. The next morning, Claire emailed me before breakfast. She said the resort's internal review had identified a few details that directly involved my reservation and asked whether I wanted a short clarification. She was careful to say they would not share Ever After Whitaker's full proposal or internal commercial correspondence. I appreciated that. The more this unfolded, the more suspicious I became of anyone who acted as though other people's documents were mine, simply because they contained information about me. Adam read the email over my shoulder. "You want to go?" "Yes. 1 hour." "I know." He smiled. "I'm not policing you. You enjoy reminding me. I enjoy having a wife who makes rules and then actually follows them." We met Claire in the same seating area off the lobby. This time she had a printed incident summary in front of her and a tablet with several sections marked. She explained that the resort had compared the third-party requests made through reservations with the marketing inquiry because the overlap had triggered their concern. They could confirm only the portions that contained information tied to my stay. "What exactly overlapped?" I asked. Claire turned the tablet so I could see a list, not the proposal itself. "Your room category, your airport transfer type, your private dinner package, the date range of your stay. Adam leaned closer. All 4? Yes. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Claire continued. There were also descriptive details in the inquiry that closely matched the way those services appear in your itinerary, which is one reason the marketing team asked reservations to confirm whose booking they were dealing with. I looked at the wording on the screen. There was no full screenshot, no secret proposal. Just a few phrases the resort had reproduced for comparison because they matched my reservation. Luxury ocean view suite. Private airport transfer. Sunset dinner for 2. I knew those phrases. Not because they were unusual. 1,000 resorts probably used the same language. But the order bothered me. Can you show me the exact sequence again? I asked. Claire did. Airport transfer. Suite. Private dinner. I took out my phone and opened the travel folder I had downloaded before we left California. The PDF I had sent my parents was still there. I opened it and scrolled. Flight details. Airport transfer. Resort confirmation. Suite category. Private dinner. I stopped. Adam saw my face. What? I handed him the phone. He looked from my PDF to Claire's summary, then back again. Same order. Almost exactly. Claire stayed quiet. I scrolled further. The confirmation number was near the top of the second page. I remembered Adam asking me about it before we left the wedding venue. At the time, the question had been so ordinary that I had barely registered it. Why do they need the reservation number? Because it's just family. Because they're emergency contacts. Because I had never considered that my mother might treat access to information as access to a decision. I sent this to my parents, I said. Claire nodded once. That could explain how the caller had enough reservation information to sound credible. But I can't determine how she obtained it. I can. Adam looked at me. You can suspect. He was right. I exhaled. I strongly suspect. Claire gave me a small, almost grateful smile. I asked whether the resort could confirm that the confirmation number used during my mother's call matched the one in my PDF. Claire said they could confirm the caller had provided the correct confirmation number, but they had no way of knowing which copy or source she had used. That distinction mattered. My PDF might have been the source. It almost certainly was, but almost certainly was not the same as proven. I thanked Claire and ended the meeting after 35 minutes. Back in our suite, I sat at the small desk near the window and opened every travel document I had shared in the past year, not because I thought there was another hidden betrayal waiting inside them, but because I wanted to understand my own habits. I had sent my parents more information than they needed, because I had treated family access as harmless by default. Flight numbers made sense. Hotel name made sense. Arrival and departure dates made sense. A confirmation number did not. Adam sat on the balcony with coffee while I worked. You blaming yourself? No. He looked skeptical. I'm auditing myself. That sounds suspiciously like professional language for blaming yourself. I turned in the chair. I made a bad information security decision. You sent travel details to your parents. With a booking number. Because you trusted them. Trust doesn't make the decision good. No, but the decision also didn't authorize what they did. I knew that. I needed to hear it anyway. There was a difference between learning from a mistake and rewriting the mistake as responsibility for someone else's behavior. I could decide never to send a full itinerary again. I could separate emergency information from access information. I could add passwords to future bookings and remove my parents as default emergency contacts if I wanted. Those were smart corrections. None of them changed the fact that my mother had taken information I gave her for one purpose and used it for another. I created a stripped-down emergency travel note for future trips. Flight numbers. Hotel name. City. Arrival and departure dates. No confirmation number. No payment details. No service package. Then I changed the passwords on the accounts connected to the trip and added security questions my family could not answer by guessing. It took less than half an hour. That small task calmed me more than another argument with my mother would have. By then, I was fairly certain the PDF had been the bridge between my private booking and my mother's plan. What I still did not understand was why she needed the bridge in the first place. If all she wanted was to give Mallory a few days away, she could have booked a different hotel, a cheaper room, or even a weekend closer to home. The precision of the overlap told me she had not simply wanted a vacation for my sister. She wanted this one. Adam's phone rang while we were getting ready to leave for lunch. He looked at the screen. Cole. I stopped fastening my watch. Answer it. Adam put the call on speaker only after asking Cole if that was okay. Cole sounded tired before he even said hello. I wanted to clear something up, he said. Mostly because I don't want this turning into another version of a story nobody agreed on. I sat down. Adam said, "Go ahead." Cole took a breath. I was told you two had changed part of your honeymoon plans. Not canceled everything. Just changed enough that Mallory and I could use the resort for a few days. Who told you that? I asked. Diane first. Then Mallory. What exactly did Diane say? That you knew Mallory and I were having problems. That you were helping us out. She said the resort stay was part of a bigger opportunity, and that everyone involved understood why it mattered. Did she say I personally agreed? Cole paused. She said it was handled. That sounded like my mother. Just specific enough to produce action. Vague enough to retreat from later. And Mallory? I asked. She said your family had worked it out. I looked at Adam. Cole continued. I should have asked you directly. I know that now. Why didn't you? Another pause. Because things with Mallory have been bad for a while, and I was trying not to make every conversation harder than it already was. There was something in his voice that made me sit straighter. How bad? He was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then he said, We haven't been living together. I looked at Adam. For how long? I asked. Almost 5 months. The answer hit me harder than I expected. 5 months. I started mentally walking backward through the year. Family dinners. Mallory arriving alone and saying Cole had work. A birthday brunch where she had spent half the meal taking pictures of the table and almost none of it talking. Mother's Day, when Mom had said Cole was out of town. I had accepted every explanation because none of those absences had seemed important enough to challenge. You're separated? I asked. Yes. Does Mom know? Yes. Dad? I think so. How long have they known? Diane has known almost from the beginning. I stood up and walked toward the balcony doors, suddenly too restless to sit. Why didn't Mallory tell me? That's a question, for her. Fair. Cole sounded relieved that I had not pushed him to answer for my sister. He continued. We didn't announce anything because Mallory wasn't ready. I wasn't trying to humiliate her. I still care about her. But the marriage has been bad for longer than the separation. I thought about my mother's words from Sunday. Mallory and Cole need time together. Your sister doesn't want everyone in her business, more than you know. For once, Mom had not been exaggerating the existence of a crisis. She had simply used the crisis as permission for everything that followed. Cole said, Diane kept telling us not to make any permanent decisions while the business was under pressure. What does the business have to do with your marriage? He gave a short laugh without humor. More than I realized when I married into it. Adam glanced at me. Cole explained that Mallory had been part of Ever After Whitaker's marketing for years. After their wedding, Diane had used photographs of Mallory and Cole in brochures, bridal expos, website pages, and social content. Nothing inherently strange about that. Mallory worked for the company, and at first Cole had agreed. Their marriage became a convenient example of the kind of romantic success Diane liked selling to clients. When they separated, the images did not disappear. Diane asked me to keep doing a few events, Cole said. Nothing huge. A dinner. A bridal showcase. A couple of vendor things. She said they had campaigns already scheduled and that Mallory didn't need a public divorce rumor while she was trying to figure out what she wanted. Did you agree? More times than I should have. Why? Because I thought giving Mallory time was different from lying. That sentence stayed with me. It was the same kind of boundary my mother had been erasing everywhere else. A small accommodation became evidence of a larger agreement. Cole stood beside Mallory at one event, so their marriage could still be marketed as intact. I sent my mother an itinerary so she could use the reservation details. I did not start a fight over cake, so apparently I was the kind of person who would eventually surrender a honeymoon. What changed? Adam asked. Cole sighed. This trip? He told us Diane had pitched the resort as a chance for Mallory and him to get away from the pressure, reconnect privately, and produce some content along the way. She had not described it as an elaborate shoot. She said there would be arrival photos, dinner photos, maybe a few informal clips. Enough to show that they were working on things. And you agreed to that? I asked. Eventually, even though you were separated. Yes. At least he did not dodge. What did you think the trip belonged to? I thought you and Adam had adjusted your plans and the company was covering whatever part we were using. That answered one question. Cole had not known he was supposed to walk into a suite I had paid for, while Adam and I stayed home, wondering what happened to our honeymoon. Did Mallory know you thought that? I assumed she did. I almost laughed at the word assumed. The entire plan seemed to be built from assumptions that benefited whichever person was making them. Cole continued. Then Adam texted me Sunday and said you never offered anything. That's when I realized I didn't actually know what had been arranged. I asked Mallory. She said Diane handled it. I asked Diane. She said there had been a misunderstanding. Of course she did. There was no satisfaction in being right. I asked the question that had bothered me since the photographer approached us at the airport. Why this resort? Cole was quiet. I don't know everything, he said. But Diane has been trying to get Ever After Whitaker into some kind of referral relationship with resorts. She said this one mattered. Did she tell you the partnership depended on you and Mallory? She said the campaign needed a real married couple. I looked out at the water. A real married couple. Except they were separated. Did you tell her no? I asked. At first. What changed your mind? She said nobody was asking us to fake being happy. Just to show that marriage takes work. I closed my eyes. That was exactly how my mother could turn dishonesty into virtue. She would not call it pretending. She would call it perseverance. She would not call it marketing a broken marriage. She would call it showing couples that real love survived hard seasons. Did she know you were considering divorce? I asked. Yes. The answer came immediately. And she still built a campaign around you. Yes. My view of Mallory shifted slightly, though not enough to excuse her. Until that call, I had seen her mainly as the younger sister who had knowingly prepared to use my honeymoon because Mom told her it would work out. That was still true. But now I saw something else around it. Mallory's marriage was falling apart. Her job depended on the family business, and her public identity had been tied to a picture of domestic happiness that our mother had helped build. She had incentives in every direction not to tell the truth. That did not make her powerless. It made her more complicated. Does Mallory want the marriage back? I asked. Cole took his time answering. I think Mallory wants everything not to have happened. That might have been the most honest sentence anyone had said to me all week. We ended the call after Cole promised to let us know if Diane or Mallory tried to represent our position to him again. I did not ask him to take sides. I did not ask him for screenshots or recordings. He had already given me enough to understand why the campaign existed. Afterward, Adam and I sat on the balcony. So, he said, 5 months. Almost. And your mother knew. Apparently, you didn't. No. How do you feel about that? I looked at him. Like an idiot. That's not a feeling. Thank you, engineer. He waited. I finally said, I feel embarrassed that I missed it. Why? Because there were signs. There are always signs after you know the answer. I hated how reasonable that was. I thought about Mallory over the last year. Her habit of posting photographs of flowers and restaurants without Cole in them. The way she had stopped complaining about him entirely, which I had interpreted as improvement. The Christmas card Mom insisted on sending with an older picture because the newer ones weren't flattering. A dozen details now looked obvious because I knew where they led, but none of them would have proven a separation on their own. More importantly, Mallory had not owed me immediate access to her marriage simply because I was her sister. She was allowed privacy. The real issue was not that I had failed to discover her separation. The issue was that my mother had used the secret as leverage to justify decisions about my life. I also had to confront something less flattering about myself. I had written Mallory off in certain ways years ago. If she canceled dinner, I assumed she had overbooked herself. If she cried after a fight with Mom, I assumed she would be fine the next day. If she described a crisis, I mentally reduced it by 30% before believing it. Sometimes I had good reasons. Mallory could be dramatic, impulsive, and remarkably skilled at letting other people absorb consequences for her. But habits of judgment become blind spots if you never update them. I had been so used to thinking of Mallory as the source of chaos that I had not considered how much of the chaos around her might be engineered by the person who always appeared to clean it up. That realization made me less certain. Mallory was the mastermind behind the honeymoon plan. It did not make me think she was innocent. There was a difference. That evening, Adam and I went to the private dinner the resort had restored under our names. There were no floral initials, no photographer, no campaign, just a table set away from the main restaurant where we could hear the water and talk without lowering our voices whenever someone passed. I expected the whole thing to feel contaminated by what I now knew. It did not. That surprised me. The dinner was ours because we were there. Not because a reservation system said so. Not because my mother had failed to redirect it. Because Adam and I had made the plan, paid for it, and chosen to show up. Halfway through dessert, my phone buzzed in my bag. I left it there. Adam noticed. "Growth. Don't ruin it." He laughed. Later, back in the suite, I finally checked the screen. There was one message from Cole. I almost ignored it until I saw the first line. I forgot one thing. I opened it. Cole wrote that during one of his conversations with Diane before the trip, he had asked why she was so determined to use Maui when he and Mallory could have gone somewhere cheaper and more private. Diane had given him an answer he had not understood at the time. According to Cole, she said, "I don't need a vacation. I need 3 days that look real." I read Cole's message twice before handing my phone to Adam. 3 days that look real. The sentence stripped away whatever remained of my mother's original explanation. This was not about giving Mallory a chance to rest. It was not about helping a struggling marriage with a quiet getaway. Diane needed photographs, scenes, and enough believable material to sell the idea that Mallory and Cole were still the romantic success story Ever After Whitaker had been using for years. Adam set the phone on the nightstand. "You want to call Mallory? Tomorrow. You sure?" "Yes." I was tired, angry, and too close to the new information to trust myself to ask only the questions that mattered. Calling my sister that night would have given her the advantage my mother always counted on: emotional confusion. I wanted facts. I wanted to know what Mallory had been told, what she actually believed, and what she knew before she packed for Maui. More than anything, I wanted to stop allowing the phrase "Mom handled it" to function as an answer. The next morning, I waited until after breakfast. Adam and I had plans to drive along the coast later, and I refused to cancel them. I told myself I had 45 minutes. If Mallory wanted to scream for 2 hours, she would have to do it without me. I called while Adam sat outside on the balcony, reading, close enough that I could reach him if I needed to, but far enough that the conversation still belonged to me. Mallory answered on the 4th ring. "What?" I talked to Cole. Her silence sharpened instantly. "Of course you did." He called Adam. "He had no right to tell you about our marriage." I didn't call to discuss whether he had the right. That's convenient. No, it's focused. She laughed once, bitterly. "You always have to sound like you're in a meeting, and you always change the subject when you don't like the question." That stopped her. I continued before she could redirect again. "Cole told us you've been separated for almost 5 months. He also told us Mom said Maui was supposed to give you 3 days that looked real." Mallory exhaled. "He shouldn't have repeated that." So she said it. "That's not what I meant." "Then tell me what you meant." There was a long pause, followed by the faint sound of a door closing on her end. When Mallory spoke again, her voice was lower. Mom has been trying to keep the business alive. I sat down. What does that have to do with my honeymoon? Everything right now has to do with the business. That's not an answer. Ever After has been losing bookings. How badly? I don't know exact numbers. You work there. I work in creative. I don't run the books. That sounded plausible, but her defensiveness told me she knew more than she wanted to say. Is the company in trouble? Yes. The simplicity of the answer caught me off guard. Mallory continued. Not bankruptcy tomorrow. Not Dad losing the house. Nothing dramatic like that. But it's bad. Mom has been pretending it isn't because that's what she does when she's scared. I looked toward the balcony. Adam had heard enough to glance up from his book, but he did not come inside. What changed? I asked. Bookings slowed. Some of the planners we used to compete with got better at social media. Couples are spending differently. Mom kept assuming it would turn around after the next bridal season. And it didn't. No. Where does Dad fit into this? Another pause. He's been helping. Helping how? Money. I stood again. What money? Aaron, don't do this. Do what? Make me be the one who tells you every secret in this family. If the secret was used to justify taking my honeymoon, then yes, I need to know. Nobody took it. You're standing in Maui. I closed my eyes briefly. Don't do that. Do what? Pretend failure makes the attempt disappear. She did not answer. I asked again. What money? Mallory sounded tired when she finally replied. Dad has put money into the business over the last couple of years. When cash flow got tight, he covered some gaps. Payroll once or twice. Marketing. A few vendor balances when clients paid late. From where? I don't know everything. What do you know? Retirement savings. My stomach tightened. How much? I honestly don't know. That time, I believed her. Does Mom expect the resort partnership to fix it? Not fix everything. But she thinks it could bring in referrals. Destination weddings. Higher budget clients. She said if they could get onto the resort's preferred planner list, it would open doors. I thought about the resort coordinator's careful explanation. Exploratory proposal. Referral possibilities. Trial content. My mother had not been chasing a fantasy. There was real business value there, which made what she had done more understandable and less forgivable at the same time. Why you and Cole? I asked. Mallory laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. Who else? A client couple. Mom wanted something she could control. That sounded more honest than anything she had said so far. And because she already markets you two. Yes. Even though you're separated. Yes. I let the silence sit between us. Mallory finally said, You don't understand what this has been like. Then explain it. You left. The words came so quickly that I knew she had been holding them for years. What? You left. You went to college, got your job, moved out, built your own life. You never wanted anything to do with Mom's business except showing up when she needed family photos. I stayed. You chose to work there. I know. Then what are you saying? I'm saying you don't know what it feels like when your job, your marriage, and your relationship with Mom are all the same thing. I wanted to tell her that sounded like a problem she had created for herself. The thought came automatically. I stopped before saying it. Mallory continued. When Cole and I started having problems, Mom didn't see it as just my marriage failing. She saw the website, the brochure, the bridal showcases. She saw every client who had ever heard her talk about us as proof that Ever After understood real marriage. That's not your responsibility. It became my responsibility a long time ago. No. It became your role. She went quiet. I did not soften the next question. And when Mom told you she was using my honeymoon for the campaign, what did you say? I didn't know it was your whole honeymoon. What did you think it was? She said you and Adam had options. What does that mean? I don't know. Yes, you do. Mallory snapped. She said Adam understood. We already covered that. Then why are you asking again? Because now I know there was a campaign before my wedding. I know Mom needed you and Cole at the resort. I know she had a photographer lined up. I know she knew your marriage was already falling apart, so I'm asking you one more time. Did you believe I had agreed? Silence. I could hear her breathing. Mallory, I thought you would. The answer was quiet enough that I almost missed it. That's not the same thing. I know. Did you believe I had already said yes? No. I sat down slowly. There it was. Not Mom confused her. Not Adam supposedly understood. Not family worked it out. No. Mallory had known the most important thing. I had not agreed. I kept my voice controlled because anything louder would have given her somewhere else to look. Then why were you going? She started crying, but not dramatically. I heard her try to control it before she answered. Because I thought you would be angry and then give in. The sentence hurt more than I expected. Not because I had never suspected it. Because hearing my own sister say it exposed something much larger than one trip. My family had built plans around the probability that my anger had an expiration date shorter than their need. You counted on me not holding the boundary. I counted on you caring about what happened if you didn't. That's the same thing with nicer wording. No, it isn't. Then tell me the difference. Mallory's voice hardened. If this partnership dies, Mom loses something she's been building for more than 20 years. Dad has money tied up in it. My marriage is already barely alive. You and Adam have good jobs. You have a good marriage. You could take another trip. I stared through the balcony doors at the ocean. There it was. The family math. My stability had become a resource. You keep saying I could take another trip, I said. Why should I? Because you can. That's not a reason. You don't know what it's like to be the person who can't afford one more thing to fall apart. Neither do you know what it's like to be the person everyone assumes can absorb whatever they don't want to carry. Mallory went quiet. I continued. You were willing to use my honeymoon because you thought I could recover from losing it? That's not how I thought about it. It doesn't matter what words you used in your head. God, Aaron, you always do that. You reduce everything to some clean rule. Consent is a clean rule. This isn't about consent. It is literally about whether you could use something I paid for. Fine. You didn't agree. I know that now. You knew it then. She inhaled sharply. I did not let her escape. You just told me you did. Okay. Say it. What? Say what you knew. Her voice dropped. I knew you hadn't said yes. I looked at the clock on the dresser. 31 minutes. And you still packed. Yes. You still planned to fly. Yes. You knew Cole believed it had been arranged. I thought Mom had explained more to him. Did you correct him? No. That answer mattered almost as much as the first one. Mallory had not masterminded the plan. She had not called the resort. She had not built the partnership proposal. But she had accepted every convenient ambiguity, as long as it moved her toward the outcome she wanted. Thank you, I said. She sounded stunned. For what? For finally giving me the truth. Don't make it sound noble. I didn't. She laughed through the remnants of tears. You really don't know how to be comforting, do you? Not when you're telling me you knowingly planned to take my honeymoon. See? That. You say it in the harshest possible way. No, Mallory. I'm saying it without Mom's vocabulary. Another silence. Then she said, Mom said the content package was already almost complete. I straightened. What content package? The concept, the resort, the arrival shots, dinner, couple photos. She said your booking matched what they needed, so using it would keep costs down. My grip tightened around the phone. She said that to you? Yes. When? Before the wedding. How far before? A couple of weeks, maybe. That meant my mother had discussed using my paid arrangements with Mallory while I was still finalizing seating charts. Why didn't you tell me? Mallory sounded exhausted. Because Mom said she'd handle you. The sentence was so revealing that neither of us spoke for several seconds. Handle me. You know what she meant. I do now. Mallory continued quickly, as though she regretted the wording. She said once you understood the business side and what was happening with Cole, you'd calm down. Did she tell you why the exact resort mattered? Preferred vendor status. She wanted a real campaign tied to a real stay. She said having the suite, transfer, dinner, and photographer already lined up made the pitch stronger. Already lined up by whom? Mostly her. No. The suite, transfer, and dinner were lined up by me. I know. The admission came much faster this time. That mattered too. What did Mom call them? What? My plans. Did she call them my honeymoon? Mallory hesitated. She called them replaceable. I actually felt something inside me go still. Replaceable. She said you and Adam were going to travel anyway. That if the resort situation got complicated, you could switch destinations later. I laughed once because the alternative was throwing my phone. Do you hear what you're saying? Yes. No, I mean really hear it. Mom didn't need to steal a vacation because she thought you deserved one. She needed specific assets for a business campaign, and she decided mine were the cheapest ones to repurpose. She didn't say it like that. Of course she didn't. I paced toward the balcony. Mallory said, I'm not defending her. You were 5 minutes ago. I'm explaining. Then keep explaining. How did she get my reservation details? I assumed from you. I never sent them to her for this. I know that. How did she get the confirmation number? Mallory went quiet. I stopped walking. What? Nothing. That wasn't nothing. Aaron, leave Dad out of this. My stomach dropped. What did Dad do? He didn't plan the campaign. What did he do? Mom asked him for the travel information. And he had the PDF. I felt the pieces click together so cleanly that I hated it. The PDF I had emailed my parents. The same PDF with the confirmation number. The same PDF whose order matched the services in the campaign concept. Did Dad give it to her? Mallory hesitated. Yes. I closed my eyes. Did he know why? I don't know exactly what she told him. Don't guess. I'm not. I know he gave her the file. I don't know how much of the content plan she explained. That distinction mattered. When? A while before the wedding. Before Mom called the resort? I think so. You think? Or you know? I don't know the exact dates. Okay. I stopped there. I was not going to turn an inference into evidence just because I disliked the person involved. But Dad giving Mom the PDF was no longer an inference. It was an allegation from Mallory, and one specific enough to verify. Why didn't Dad tell me? I asked. Mallory sounded almost surprised. Because he wanted the partnership to work. There was no bitterness in her answer. Just acceptance. I thought about my father at the cake table. Don't make a scene. At the time, I had heard a lifetime of conflict avoidance in those words. Now I heard something else. Financial fear. If Dad had retirement money tied up in Ever After Whitaker, then my public reaction at the wedding was not simply inconvenient. It threatened the story supporting an investment he needed to succeed. I looked at the clock again. 43 minutes. I have to go. Mallory sounded offended. That's it? For today? We're talking about our family falling apart, and you have somewhere to be? Yes. Unbelievable. No. Deliberate. I took a breath. I am sorry your marriage is hurting. I am sorry the business is struggling. I am sorry Dad put money into something that may not recover. None of those things give you my honeymoon. I know. And understanding why you did it doesn't make it okay. I know. Do you? She was silent. I continued. I'm not cutting you off. I'm not posting any of this. I'm not calling every relative to tell them what you admitted. But I'm also not going to pretend you were tricked into everything. Mom manipulated the situation. You still chose to benefit from it. Her voice was small when she answered. I know. This time, I believed she might. We ended the call without resolving anything between us. Adam came inside when he heard the silence. How bad? Bad in a different direction. I told him what Mallory had said. The business losses. Dad's money. The content package. Mom describing our plans as replaceable. Mallory knowing I had never agreed. Most importantly, I told him about the PDF. Adam sat across from me. Your dad gave it to her. According to Mallory. Right. I want to call him. Today, I looked at the clock. Our plans started in 20 minutes. Every instinct I had told me to cancel them. Dad had moved from background figure to active participant in one sentence. I wanted to know what he knew, when he knew it, and whether he understood what Mom intended when he handed over my travel information. Then I thought about why we had created the 1-hour rule. Information would still exist tomorrow. My honeymoon would not repeat itself for my convenience. No, I said. Not today. Adam nodded. We spent the afternoon driving along the coast. I was not perfectly present. I thought about Dad more than once. I thought about the PDF. I remembered sending it and seeing his reply. Got it. Have a great trip. At the time, it had seemed like the most ordinary message in the world. By evening, my anger had changed shape. With Mom, anger had always been easy because she acted. She pushed, she arranged, she justified. Dad specialized in making himself look adjacent to decisions. He was the man who sighed while Mom argued. The man who told everyone to lower their voices. The man who claimed he was trying to keep the peace while consistently helping the person most willing to break it. If Mallory was right, he had not simply failed to stop Mom this time. He had handed her the key. At dinner, Adam asked, "What are you going to say to him?" I looked across the table. I don't know yet. That's new. I usually prepare arguments. You usually prepare answers. I thought about that. He was right. This time I did not want an argument. I wanted 3 answers. Did Dad give Mom the PDF? Did he know she intended to use it to alter my honeymoon arrangements? Did he know before he told me not to make a scene at my wedding? I did not need to prove the whole case in one conversation. I only needed to stop allowing vague language to protect him. After dinner, I checked my phone. There were 2 missed calls from Dad. No voicemail. 1 text. Your mother says you've been talking to Mallory about private business matters. We need to keep this in the family. I stared at the message longer than I should have. Then I typed 1 sentence. We will talk when I get home. I did not send another question. I did not warn him what I knew. I did not give him time to coordinate a story with Mom. I put the phone down and looked at Adam. When we get home, I said, I'm not talking to Mom first. He already knew. Your dad? I nodded. Because for most of my life, my father had convinced me that standing quietly beside someone else's bad decision was different from participating in it. Now I knew he had given my mother the PDF. The last full day of our honeymoon was the first day I did not speak to anyone in my family. I did not call Dad. I did not answer Mom. I did not ask Mallory whether she had remembered anything else. Adam and I left our phones in the room, rented a car, and spent the day doing exactly what we had flown to Maui to do. We stopped wherever we wanted, ate when we were hungry, and took pictures that no one had staged. At one point, Adam asked me if I was thinking about the conversation waiting for me at home, and I told him the truth. Of course I was. But thinking about something was different from handing it the whole day. That mattered because I had finally understood how my family operated. They created urgency, then used that urgency to choose everyone else's priorities. Mom would decide something needed to happen immediately. Dad would warn that delaying it would make everything worse. Mallory would arrive already positioned as the person who would suffer if anyone refused. By the time I noticed what had happened, the question was no longer whether I wanted to participate. It was whether I was willing to be blamed for stopping something already in motion. For once, I refused to move at their speed. Adam and I flew back to California on Sunday. By the time we landed, I had 8 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Dad, and a text from Mallory saying only, Dad knows you know about the PDF. I read it, then put my phone away. Adam watched me. You're not calling him tonight? No. Good. I looked at him. You don't get to sound that pleased. I'm not pleased. I'm impressed. By what? You finally stopped treating other people's panic like a calendar invitation. I laughed despite myself. We went home, unpacked, ordered takeout, and slept in our own bed. The next morning, I went to work. That decision made Mom furious. She called at 9:15. I was between meetings and answered because I knew if I didn't, she would start calling my office line. Where are you? She asked. At work? You're at work? Yes. I thought we were going to talk. We are. When? Not while I'm working. Erin, this cannot wait forever. It's waited since before my wedding. She went quiet. I continued. I'm meeting Dad after work. That landed badly. Why are you meeting him without me? Because I have questions for him. Questions about what? He knows. Your father was trying to help me. I didn't ask what you think he was trying to do. Do not turn us against each other over this. I'm not doing that. It sounds like you are. No. I'm talking to one person about one decision he made. She started to say something else, but I cut in. I have a meeting in 2 minutes. I'll call you later. You always hide behind work. No, I protect work from family problems. I ended the call before she could answer. At 5:30, I met Dad at a coffee shop halfway between my office and my parents' house. I chose somewhere public but quiet, not because I expected a scene, but because Dad was better at staying factual when he could not retreat into familiar family roles. At home, he would have sat at the kitchen table while Mom moved around behind him, correcting him with facial expressions before he finished a sentence. I did not want that. He was already there when I arrived. He looked older than he had at the wedding, though only 9 days had passed. I knew some of that was projection. Guilt always made people look more tired when you were angry with them. He stood when I approached. How was Maui? Beautiful. I'm glad. I sat across from him. Did you give Mom the PDF I sent you? No small talk. No soft entry. Dad looked down at his coffee. Aiden. Yes or no? He sighed. Yes. I expected satisfaction from getting the answer. I felt none. When? A few weeks before the wedding. Before she called the resort? I don't know exactly when she called them. Did you know she planned to use information from my itinerary? I knew she needed the details. For what? He leaned back. Your mother told me she was working on something for Mallory. That's not an answer. I knew there was a resort opportunity. Did you know it involved my honeymoon? He rubbed his forehead. Yes. That hurt more than the first yes. I waited a second before continuing. Did you know she intended to add Mallory and Cole to my reservation? I knew she was trying to coordinate things. Coordinate is not a fact. He looked irritated. You don't have to talk to me like I'm on the witness stand. Then answer like my father. His face changed. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I said more quietly, Did you know she was calling the resort to put Mallory into services Adam and I paid for? I knew she was going to see what was possible. Did you know I hadn't agreed? He did not answer. I leaned forward. Dad, I knew you hadn't agreed yet. Yet. The word mattered. Not because it changed anything, but because it revealed the assumption underneath everything else. You thought I would. He exhaled. I thought once you understood what was happening, you would help. So you gave Mom the information first. Because there was a timing issue. What timing issue? The resort opportunity. I let out a short laugh. There it is. What? The real deadline. Erin, this is bigger than you think. I know. No, I don't think you do. I sat back. Then explain it. Dad looked around the coffee shop, as if the answer might be less embarrassing if no one else could hear. Ever After has been struggling for almost 2 years. Mallory told me. His jaw tightened. She shouldn't have. Why? Because it isn't her story to tell. It became my story when my honeymoon was used to support it. He looked away. I continued. How much money have you put into the business? That's private. Then don't use it to pressure me. I'm not pressuring you. Dad, you told me not to punish the family over one trip. Mom told me your money was at risk. Mallory told me the partnership mattered because of what you put in. Your investment is already part of the argument. He was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, More than I should have. Retirement money? Some. How much? I don't want to get into exact numbers. I believed that was partly pride, and partly because he genuinely did not owe me a spreadsheet. I did not need the amount to understand the motive. Did you take money from the house? He looked at me sharply. What did Mallory tell you? That there was a home equity line. He closed his eyes briefly. Yes. Against your house? Yes. Mom's business? Yes. There was no dramatic revelation in the way he said it. That made it feel heavier. Why? His answer came faster than I expected. Because I thought we could stabilize it. Ve? Your mother and I. Does she own the business? Yes. So why are you taking retirement risk for it? Because I'm married to her. I almost smiled, but there was nothing funny about it. How long have you been covering gaps? About 2 years. Not continuously. Payroll? Sometimes. Marketing? Sometimes. Vendor balances? He looked at me. You already know enough. I nodded. I know enough to understand why you wanted the partnership. Dad picked up his coffee but did not drink it. It wasn't some fantasy, he said. Your mother had data. Destination weddings are still strong in certain segments. Preferred vendor relationships matter. She had a reasonable plan. A reasonable business plan. Yes. And an unreasonable way to fund the campaign. He frowned. That isn't fair. Which part? You're making it sound like she stole money from you. I haven't said that once. You keep implying it. No. I keep saying she used my reservation without permission. Nothing was actually transferred. I stared at him. He realized immediately he had repeated the same argument from Sunday. I said, Do you understand why that doesn't help? He looked down. She tried, I continued. The hotel stopped it before it went further. That doesn't erase the attempt. She was trying to fix something. What? He looked up. Your mother was trying to fix the family. I almost let the sentence pass. It was exactly the kind of phrase Dad had used my whole life. Broad enough to sound noble. Vague enough to hide who was paying for the repair. With my honeymoon? With what was falling apart? You mean Mallory? I mean the family. I studied him. That was the clearest answer he had given me all evening. To Dad, my honeymoon was not entirely mine. Once another member of the family needed something from it. My stability had made my resources negotiable. His money was being lost. Mallory's marriage was failing. Mom's business was slipping. And because Adam and I were fine, we had somehow become the available inventory. Do you hear yourself? I asked. He looked tired. You have a good marriage. So? You have a good job. Adam has a good job. So? You travel. So? He sighed. Mallory doesn't have any of that right now. That does not make my life communal property. Nobody said it did. You did, just more politely. Aaron. Families help each other. Yes. He looked surprised that I agreed. I continued. Helping means I decide what I give. It doesn't mean you move things out of my hands because you already decided I can live without them. His face hardened. Your mother made a mistake. No. She made a plan. People make bad decisions under pressure. I agree. Then why are you treating this like some unforgivable betrayal? I'm not. What do you call this? Consequences. He leaned back. I could see him becoming defensive, but I did not want the conversation to turn into a contest over who could produce the strongest sentence. I had what I came for. One more question. He said nothing. When you told me not to make a scene at the cake table, did you already know Mom had plans for Mallory to go to Maui? His eyes moved away from mine. That was the answer before he spoke. Yes. I felt something in me settle. Not break. Settle. The cake had bothered me because it was humiliating. The honeymoon had angered me because it crossed a boundary. But this was different. Dad had stood beside me at my wedding knowing Mom had already built a plan around my compliance, and when Mallory took the first slice of my cake, his priority was not figuring out why his younger daughter was standing where the bride should have been. It was preventing me from reacting in a way that might destabilize whatever Mom was trying to preserve. I need you to understand something, I said. Dad looked back at me. When you told me not to make a scene, you weren't keeping the peace. I was trying to get through your wedding. No. You were protecting a plan I didn't know existed. That's not how I saw it. I know. That was probably the saddest part. He really had not seen himself as an accomplice. He had seen himself as a reasonable man standing between emotional women. I love you, I said. But I'm not going to pretend you were just nearby. His expression changed slightly. I didn't expect you to say that. Why? Because you usually blame your mother. There it was. Another truth I did not particularly enjoy. He was right. For years, I had treated Dad's passivity as lesser wrongdoing because Mom was louder. She acted. He softened. She pushed. He translated. She crossed the line. He explained why she had been stressed. I had mistaken quiet participation for neutrality. I did, I said. That was easier. Dad's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it. Mom. Of course. He did not answer. I almost respected that until he said, She wants to know how this went. Then tell her. What should I tell her? The truth. He gave me a tired smile. You make everything sound simple. No. I make some things sound clear. I stood. Dad looked up. Yes. We haven't talked about what happens next. With what? The resort. I paused. What about it? Your mother thinks they're reconsidering the partnership because of the complaint. I didn't file a complaint. You gave them information. They asked whether I authorized changes. I answered. That has consequences. Then maybe she should have asked, before creating the reason they needed to verify. He shook his head. You know what I mean. I do. I just don't agree. I left before he could turn the conversation into another version of responsibility transfer. When I got home, Adam was making dinner. I told him the important parts while he chopped vegetables. Dad had given Mom the PDF. He knew she was using it for the resort plan. He knew I had not agreed. He knew before the cake cutting. He had retirement savings tied up in the business and had used a home equity line to help keep it stable. Adam stopped chopping when I told him that last part. That's serious. Yes. Does that change what you want to do? No. He nodded. That answer came more easily than I expected. I felt bad for Dad. I did. Losing retirement money would hurt. Changing plans after retirement would hurt. Admitting he had backed the wrong strategy would hurt. None of that made me responsible for validating a lie. We were halfway through dinner when my phone buzzed. An email from the resort. The subject line was formal enough that I knew it mattered before I opened it. Claire had copied the marketing coordinator. The message thanked me for my cooperation and said that because reservation information associated with a paying guest had been referenced in connection with a commercial proposal without clear guest authorization, the resort was pausing further partnership discussions with Ever After Whitaker while they reviewed the matter. I read it twice. Adam watched my face. What? I handed him the phone. He read it. Paused. Not canceled. No. I knew exactly what Mom would hear. Not paused. Threatened. My phone rang before Adam handed it back. Mom. I considered letting it go to voicemail. Then I answered. You talked to your father. Yes. And now the resort has frozen everything. I just got the email. Do you understand what this could do? To the partnership? To the business? Mom, the resort made that decision. Because of what you told them. Because they found a conflict between your proposal and my reservation, which you could clear up. I went still. How? Her tone changed immediately. Softer. More controlled. By explaining that this was a family arrangement that became confused. It wasn't. You knew Mallory was struggling. Not until after the wedding. You knew we were trying to help her. After I caught you. Stop using language like that. What language would you prefer? There was no theft, no fraud, no transfer. You went on the trip. Correct. Then tell them that. They already know. Tell them the family understood there might be adjustments. We didn't. Iden. Mom. She exhaled slowly. All they need is clarification that I acted in good faith and that you understood the general situation. I didn't. You would have if we'd had time to explain. That is not the same sentence. You are being impossible. No. I'm refusing to say something untrue. The next morning, she emailed me a document. Not a legal filing, not some dramatic contract. A one-page statement. The first sentence said, I confirm that my family had my permission to coordinate changes related to my honeymoon reservation and that any confusion resulted from a private family misunderstanding. I read it once. Then I read it again, more slowly. because I wanted to be certain I was not reacting to tone instead of content. Adam stood behind me. "What does it say?" I turned the laptop toward him. He read the first paragraph. Then he looked at me. "Are you going to sign that?" I closed the document. No, because by then, the problem was no longer whether my family had crossed a line. They were asking me to move it backward and pretend they never had. The statement sat in my inbox for less than an hour before I realized I was thinking about it the wrong way. My first reaction had been emotional. I was angry that my mother wanted me to sign something false. My second reaction was more useful. Before I told anyone what I would or would not sign, I needed to know exactly what I had already agreed to elsewhere. Adam came home that evening with groceries and found me at the dining table with my laptop open and 3 documents on the screen: the resort booking terms, our wedding photographer's contract, our videographer's contract. I had printed Diane's statement and placed it beside them because I wanted the contrast in front of me. He put the grocery bag on the counter. "You look like you're preparing for an audit." "Of my own life." "That sounds healthy." "Probably isn't." He pulled out the chair beside me. "What are we looking for?" "Not we." He raised an eyebrow. "I mean, you're welcome to sit here. But I'm not asking you to decide this for me." "I know. I want to know what I actually signed before Mom starts telling people I'm withdrawing permissions I already gave." That was the part I had not considered when I first got angry. I knew I had never told Ever After Whitaker it could use my honeymoon. I knew I had never told my mother she could alter my reservation. But weddings came with contracts, releases, checkboxes, portfolio clauses, and vendor terms. Most people skimmed because they were too busy choosing flowers and seating charts. I did not want to make a confident statement and later discover that I had signed something broader than I remembered. The resort booking was easy. The reservation belonged to Adam and me. There was nothing in it allowing relatives to act on our behalf, nothing giving my mother's company access to our booking, and nothing authorizing commercial use of our itinerary. The photographer's contract took longer. He had permission to use a limited selection of wedding photographs in his own portfolio and promotional materials. I remembered agreeing to that. Adam and I had liked his work because we had seen other couples in his portfolio, so refusing the same permission would have felt hypocritical. But the clause applied to his studio. It did not say he could hand our wedding gallery to my mother's company for a separate advertising campaign. The videographer's contract was similar. His studio could use short excerpts in its own reel unless we opted out. More important to me, our package included access to the unedited camera archive after delivery. We had paid extra for that because Adam wanted the candid footage. Nothing in the agreement gave Ever After Whitaker rights to use the material. I read both contracts twice anyway. Adam leaned closer. So Mom's company doesn't have anything that you can find. Right. He smiled slightly. What? You've started qualifying your sentences. Apparently marriage to an engineer is contagious. I was hoping for better hobbies. I closed the contracts and looked at Diane's statement again. I confirmed that my family had my permission to coordinate changes related to my honeymoon reservation. False. I understood that any confusion resulted from a private family misunderstanding. False. Ever After Whitaker acted in good faith while attempting to support a family member during a difficult personal period. That one was more interesting because it was not mine to certify. I could not know what was in my mother's head when she called the resort. I knew what she did. I knew what Mallory had been told. I knew what Dad admitted. I knew what the resort had documented. I did not know Diane's internal intentions, and I was not going to sign a sentence pretending I did. Adam read over my shoulder. What part of that is actually true? I looked at him. He shrugged. You don't have to sign theirs, but if the resort needs clarification, what would you be willing to say? That changed the problem. I opened a blank document. I did not write it like a lawyer. I did not threaten anyone. I did not demand damages or use words like fraud because I had no interest in turning a family dispute into a legal performance. I wrote the facts as plainly as I could. I had not authorized Diane Whitaker, Robert Whitaker, Mallory Whitaker, or any other family member to make changes to my honeymoon reservation. Adam and I had never offered any portion of our honeymoon to Mallory and Cole. I had never authorized Ever After Whitaker to use my wedding, honeymoon itinerary, or marriage as part of a commercial campaign. Any future request presented as coming from me should require written confirmation directly from me or Adam. That was it. No accusation. No theory about what Mom intended. No request that the resort punish her. I read it aloud once. Adam said, "Every sentence true?" "Yes." "Then send that." I attached it to an email to Claire and the resort marketing coordinator. I explained that I was providing a factual clarification in response to their review, and that I was not asking them to take any particular action against Ever After Whitaker. I only wanted the record to reflect what I had and had not authorized. My finger hovered over the send button longer than I expected. Adam noticed. "You okay? If I send this, Mom is going to say I killed the partnership." "Did you?" "No." "Then why are you hesitating?" "Because I knew what would happen next." Facts did not remain facts in my family once consequences arrived. They became weapons someone had chosen to use. Mom would not say the resort paused the partnership because she built a campaign around a reservation she did not control. She would say Aaron refused to clear up a misunderstanding. Dad would say one signature could have protected years of work. Someone would tell me family should matter more than being technically correct. For most of my life, that prediction would have been enough to make me soften the statement. This time I clicked send. The feeling afterward was not victory. It was relief. The next thing I did was less dramatic. I emailed our photographer and videographer. I did not tell them the entire story. I did not attach Diane's statement. I did not ask them to delete anything they were already allowed to use in their own portfolios. I simply said that a third-party business connected to my family might contact them seeking wedding photographs or footage for commercial use, and that I had not authorized Ever After Whitaker to use our wedding materials for its marketing. Our photographer replied first. "Thanks for clarifying. Your gallery remains subject to our existing contract. We will not provide images to a third party on your behalf without separate permission." The videographer replied almost the same thing. His studio retained the portfolio rights we had agreed to, but any request from another company would require its own arrangement and whatever permissions applied. I stared at those two emails for a while. They were boring. I loved them. No dramatic threat. No loophole. No magical document that destroyed my mother. Just two vendors confirming the limits of agreements that already existed. That was what I wanted the rest of this to become. Limits. Not revenge theater. Mom called the next morning. I was at my desk at work and let it go to voicemail. She called again 12 minutes later. Then Dad called. I answered Dad. "Your mother says you sent something to the resort." "I did." "What?" "A factual statement." "Why didn't you send it to us first?" "Because it wasn't for you." He went quiet. "What did you say?" "That I never authorized changes, never offered the honeymoon to Mallory and Cole, and never gave Ever After Whitaker permission to use my wedding or honeymoon for commercial marketing." Dad exhaled slowly. "Aaron, do you understand how that sounds? Accurate? You know what I mean." "I do. That's why I chose the word accurate. This isn't funny. I'm not joking." He lowered his voice. "The resort may treat that as confirmation that Diane misrepresented the arrangement. If that's what their records show, that's their decision. You know your mother didn't think she was misrepresenting anything. I can't certify what Mom thought. You know her. Apparently not as well as either of us believed." Dad was quiet for several seconds. Then he said, "Could you at least tell them the family situation was complicated?" "It was." "Then say that. It doesn't change whether I agreed. Sometimes context matters. Then Mom can provide hers." He sighed. "You're drawing a very hard line." "No. The line was always there. We're just not pretending it moved." He did not like that answer. I could tell because he switched arguments. "Your mother has spent 23 years building this company." "I know. People depend on it." "I know. Your sister's job depends on it." "I know. My money is tied up in it." "I know. And none of that matters to you?" "It matters." "Then act like it." I sat back in my chair. "Dad, what exactly are you asking me to do?" "Help." "How?" Clarify that Diane wasn't trying to deceive anyone. I don't know that. You know your mother. You already said that. Because it's true. No. I know what she tells herself. That's not the same as knowing what she represented to the resort. His frustration sharpened. You are going to regret being this rigid. Maybe. The answer surprised him. I continued. I might regret some of this. I don't get perfect information. I don't get to know how the business will look 6 months from now. But I'd rather regret telling the truth than fix this by signing something false. Dad did not answer. I ended the call a minute later because I had another meeting. That afternoon, my aunt called. I almost ignored her. We were not especially close, and she rarely called me directly. That was exactly why I answered. Erin, sweetheart, I hope I'm not bothering you. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to check in. I knew where this was going. She spent less than a minute asking about Maui before saying, Your mother mentioned there was some kind of misunderstanding with the resort. There it was. I looked out my office window. What did she tell you? Just that there was confusion around Mallory possibly joining part of the trip, and now the resort thinks your mother's company acted improperly. Did she tell you I agreed to Mallory using the trip? My aunt hesitated. She said everyone thought you understood. That's not what I asked. A longer pause. No. I kept my voice calm. I never agreed. That's what I'm correcting. My aunt sighed. I know. I just hate seeing everyone so upset. So do I. Your mother thinks you could make this go away. I know. And you don't want to? That question irritated me more than I expected. I don't have a version of the truth that makes it go away. Couldn't you just explain it was family? It being family is not the disputed fact. She went quiet. I realized I was becoming colder with her than I intended. My aunt had not changed my reservation. She had not taken my PDF. She was repeating the version she had been given because Mom had put her in the middle. I took a breath. I'm sorry. I'm not angry at you. I know you're under stress. I am. But I also don't want to turn you into a messenger. She sounded relieved. That's fair. If Mom wants to talk to me, she knows how. She says you won't listen. I've listened a lot. My aunt laughed softly. That sounds like Diane. For the first time in the call, I smiled. We ended without me sending her screenshots, resort emails, or a summary of everything Dad and Mallory had admitted. The old version of me might have said nothing at all, then spent 3 days furious that Mom controlled the story. The angrier version of me wanted to send proof to everyone. I did neither. I gave my aunt one fact. I never agreed. That was enough. Later that evening, Claire emailed me again. The resort had reached out separately to Cole because his name appeared in materials submitted in connection with the proposed campaign. The contact information had been provided through Ever After Whitaker's own submission, so they were not asking me to put anyone in touch. Claire told me only that Cole had chosen to provide his own clarification and had given permission for the resort to acknowledge the portions relevant to my reservation. He wrote that Diane had told him Adam and I understood and had offered the resort arrangement as a way for him and Mallory to reconnect. He said that after Adam contacted him and stated clearly that we had never offered the trip and were still traveling, he withdrew from the plan. Most important, Cole said he had not known I objected because he had been told the opposite. I read the summary twice. It was the first independent first-person account that did not come through me. The resort now had its own reservation records. My statement, and Cole's statement. Not a family rumor, not Erin versus Diane. 3 different sources describing the same gap. My mother had represented an agreement that did not exist. I forwarded nothing to Dad. I forwarded nothing to Mallory. I did not need to. Mom called before dinner. This time I answered. What did you send, Cole? Nothing. Don't lie to me. I didn't. The resort contacted him. Then talked to the resort. Why would they contact him unless you gave them his information? I didn't. She paused. I could almost hear the moment she realized her own company had submitted his contact information with the campaign materials. Did he give them a statement? She asked. Apparently. About what? You should ask him. Her voice went tight. You know he is angry with Mallory. That doesn't make his account false. You don't know what he said. Neither do you, apparently. She ignored that. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Everyone is telling their own version now. I sat down at the kitchen table. That's usually what happens when there wasn't one true version to begin with. There was a true version. Then why did I never hear it before the wedding? You wouldn't have understood. You keep saying that. Because you are proving it. I almost laughed. Mom, what do you want from me right now? I want you to sign the statement. No, I want you to stop contacting vendors. I contacted my own wedding vendors to tell them they do not have my authorization to provide our materials to your company. You are interfering with my business. No, I'm defining what belongs to me. Those photographs include family members. They do. You can't claim ownership over everyone's image. I'm not. She stopped for a second. I could tell she had expected a broader claim, something easier to attack. I continued. The photographer can use the photographs according to the contract I signed. The videographer can use clips according to his contract. You don't have a separate commercial authorization from me. This is ridiculous. It's actually very simple. No, Aaron, it isn't. If the resort walks away because of this, do you know what happens to your father? I felt the conversation change. There it was. Not Mallory this time. Dad. What happens to him? He loses money he may never get back. He already invested it. He invested it because he believed we had a path forward. That was his choice. He's 66. I know how old Dad is. He doesn't have another 30 years to rebuild retirement savings. I know. Then how can you sit there and act like this has nothing to do with you? I closed my eyes, because that was the argument designed for me. Not Mom's business. Not Mallory's marriage. Dad's retirement. Something real. Something painful. Something I could not dismiss as vanity. For a moment, guilt landed exactly where she wanted it. Then, I separated two facts. Dad could lose money. I had not chosen where he invested it. Mom, I said, Dad chose where to put his money. I choose where to put my name. That is unbelievably selfish. No. What's selfish is asking me to certify something false because the truth is expensive. You would rather watch your father lose part of his retirement than help your own family. Those are not the only two options. They may be. Then that's because of decisions made before I knew there was a problem. She was crying now, or at least her voice sounded close to it. You think you're so much better than us. No, you always have. No, Mom. I spent years thinking being the reasonable daughter meant I had to make everyone else's unreasonable decisions easier to survive. She went silent. I regretted the sentence almost immediately, not because it was false, but because it sounded like a closing argument. I did not want to win the call. I wanted it to end. I am not signing your statement, I said. If you have facts you want the resort to consider, send them yourself. You know what they're going to think. I don't. You know exactly what they're going to think. Then maybe that's the problem. She hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for several minutes after the call ended. Adam came in from the garage and took one look at me. Bad? Effective. He set his keys down. Meaning? She used Dad. He sat across from me. Did it work? For about 30 seconds. That's still work. I know. I told him what she said. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked, Do you think his money should change what you say happened? No. Then there's your answer. I nodded. My phone buzzed. A text from Mallory. I almost left it unread. After our last conversation, I was not ready for another round of defense, guilt, or explanations about what Mom meant. Then I saw the preview. Can we meet without Mom there? A second message followed before I opened the first. There are things she told me that don't match what Cole says she told him. I stared at the screen. Then the third message appeared. And I don't think she told Dad the same thing either. I looked up at Adam. What? I turned the phone toward him. He read the messages without touching it. I picked the phone back up and read the final line Mallory sent. She told all of us different things. Mallory chose a coffee shop near a park about 20 minutes from my office. Far enough from our parents' house that Mom was unlikely to appear by accident and public enough that neither of us could turn the conversation into a performance. I arrived first and took a table outside. When Mallory walked up, I almost didn't recognize her for a second. Not because she looked physically different, but because she looked unfinished. No styled hair, no polished makeup, no outfit that could have doubled as a brand photo for Ever After Whitaker. Just jeans, a loose sweater, and dark circles under her eyes. She sat across from me and wrapped both hands around the coffee she had bought inside. "Does Mom know you're here?" I asked. "No." "Does Dad?" "No." "Does Cole?" "Yes." That answer made me feel slightly better. Mallory looked at me. "You're checking whether I'm setting you up." "I'm checking who knows what." "Fair." We sat in silence for a moment. I could hear children yelling near the playground and someone dragging a stroller across the gravel path. It was such an ordinary afternoon that the conversation almost felt misplaced. Mallory finally said, "Cole told me what he said to the resort." "I know. He didn't tell me exactly what he wrote. He didn't tell me either." She nodded. That mattered more than it should have. Everyone had spent weeks carrying fragments of information and calling them complete stories. Mallory took a breath. "Mom told me Adam understood the situation before the wedding. She told me you said that already." "I know, but she made it sound more specific than I made it sound to you." "How?" "She said she'd talked around the issue with him. Not that she'd asked permission directly, but that he understood I might need the resort and wasn't going to fight you about it." I frowned. "Adam says the only conversation he remembers was Mom saying you and Cole might join us for dinner sometime if you were both in a better place." "That's not what she told me." "I know." Mallory looked down at her coffee. I said, "What did she tell Cole? That you and Adam were helping us?" "That matches what he said. She told him you had offered the resort arrangement because you knew we were struggling." "And Dad?" Mallory shook her head. "Different again." "How different?" "She told him you weren't attached to Maui." I stared at her. "What?" "She said you and Adam had talked about changing destinations before. That you liked traveling enough that if the resort plan became complicated, you'd just upgrade somewhere else later." "That never happened." "I know that now." "Did you know it then?" "No. I knew you traveled a lot." It sounded plausible. I almost argued that Adam and I did not travel a lot, but the distinction did not matter. "What else did she tell Dad?" "That you wouldn't want my marriage problems becoming a big family discussion at your wedding." "That part's probably true." Mallory gave me a tired look. "You wouldn't." "No. Mom used that." I leaned back. "Meaning?" "She told Dad that if the plan got uncomfortable, the worst thing he could do was let you react publicly, because then people would start asking why Cole and I needed the trip." I thought about the cake table again. "Don't make a scene." Dad had not only been protecting the resort plan, he had also been protecting the secret underneath it. That explains why he was so focused on me staying quiet. Mallory nodded. I said, "What did Mom tell you about Dad's money?" "That the partnership could protect him." "Protect him from what?" "Having to admit he'd lost part of his retirement backing her." I felt my jaw tighten. She said it like that? Not exactly. She said if the partnership worked, Dad would be able to look back and know helping the business had been worth it. That sounded exactly like the kind of sentence my mother would use. Not save Dad from a financial mistake. Prove his faith had been justified. "And what did she tell Dad about you?" Mallory looked away toward the park. "That I was fragile." "Are you?" "Sometimes." "That's not what I asked." She almost smiled. "You're doing the meeting voice again. Answer anyway." Mallory sighed. She made it sound like if the partnership fell apart and Cole left at the same time, I might fall apart too. "Did you tell her that?" "No." "Did you tell Dad that?" "No." "So she made you the emotional hostage." Mallory winced. "That's harsh. Is it wrong?" She thought about it. "No." We were quiet again. I took out my phone but did not unlock it. "I want to compare the versions we know," I said. "Not theories. Things people actually said." Mallory nodded. I started with myself. "Mom told me after the wedding that you and Cole needed time together. She said I had a good marriage, a good job, and could take another trip." Mallory closed her eyes briefly. "She told me basically the same thing about you." "What?" "That you had options. That you were always the one who could recover." I ignored the sting. She told Dad I wasn't attached to Maui. She told Cole I offered the trip. She told you Adam understood. Yes, and she told Adam almost nothing. Apparently. That's interesting. Mallory looked at me. Why? Because he was the one person she couldn't easily pressure through family history. She went still. I continued. She didn't need Adam to believe the plan. She needed him not to interfere before I gave in. Mallory looked down. That sounds right. I hated how well it fit. Mom had not told one enormous lie. She had built a structure from smaller ones. Every person received the version most likely to keep them moving. Cole got generosity. Mallory got inevitability. Dad got financial rescue. I got guilt. Adam got ambiguity. No one had enough information to stop the plan early, because no one had been given the same plan. Mallory said, "That's what I meant when I texted you. Every time I compare what she said to someone else, it changes." Do you still think she thought I agreed? Mallory looked at me. No. The answer came faster than before. I did not let her move past it. Then, say it clearly. She rubbed her palms against the paper cup. I knew you hadn't said yes. I know. No, I mean I knew before the wedding. I waited. Mallory's eyes filled, but she kept going. I knew Mom hadn't gotten a yes from you. She kept saying you would understand once everything was in place. Did that bother you? Yes. Enough to stop? No. There was the answer. I said nothing. Mallory's voice became unsteady. I wanted her to be right. About what? About you. Meaning? That you'd get angry, but you wouldn't let everything collapse. I felt something inside me harden, then soften into something less useful than anger. Everything. The partnership. Dad's money. My marriage. The business. And my honeymoon was what? She looked directly at me. Something you could survive losing. That was the first time anyone in my family had said the logic out loud without decorating it. I nodded once. Thank you. Mallory stared at me. You already said that last time. Because the truth is useful. Even when it makes you hate me? I don't hate you. She laughed softly. That's almost worse. No. What's worse is if I decide you're either completely evil or completely manipulated. You're neither. Her face changed. I continued. Mom built the plan. Mom called the resort. Mom constructed the different stories. Dad gave her the PDF. But you knew I hadn't agreed. And prepared to go anyway. I know. You don't get to disappear behind her. I'm not trying to. You did for years. Mallory flinched. That was sharper than I intended. But not false. She looked toward the park again. Do you know what it's like working with her? No. Then don't pretend you understand everything. I don't. She turned back, surprised. I understand what happened to me. That's enough to hold you responsible for your part. Mallory's shoulders dropped slightly. I kept thinking if I left the company, she'd see it as choosing Cole over the family. Did Cole ask you to leave? No. Then why does leaving the company have to be about Cole? She stared at me. I could see the thought land. Mallory had spent so much time inside Mom's system that even escape had to be framed as allegiance to someone else. She said, because I don't know what I am without it. That was the most vulnerable thing she had said all afternoon. What do you mean? I started helping Mom with events in college. Then social media. Then client shoots. Then creative direction. Everything I know how to do professionally is attached to her company. You know how to do those things outside her company. Maybe. You do. She shook her head. That's easy for you to say. Probably. You built your career without anyone handing you an identity. I built it away from all of you. The words came out before I decided whether to say them. Mallory looked at me. I continued. That's not the same as building it without help. I had distance. You didn't. She was quiet. I could feel my own view of her shifting again. Not toward forgiveness, but toward proportion. For years, I had thought Mallory stayed close to Mom because she liked being favored. She did like it. She also depended on it. Those two things could exist together. Mallory said, "When Cole and I separated, I thought I was losing my marriage. Mom kept talking like I was losing the company too, because she uses your marriage in the brand." "Yes. And you let her?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because if I admitted the marriage was over, then every photo, every expo, every story she told about us started to feel fake. It was already fake. Not all of it." I understood what she meant. The marriage had once been real. The photographs had once reflected something true. The lie came later, when reality changed and everyone kept selling the old version. Mallory rubbed her thumb along the edge of the cup. "Mom kept saying we just needed more time. For you and Cole? For everything. Did you believe her?" I wanted to. There it was again. Wanting something to be true had become the permission structure for half the family. I asked, "What are you going to do now?" Mallory looked frightened in a way I had not seen since we were younger. "I think I have to leave the company." I did not answer immediately. She watched me. "Say something." "Why?" "What? Why do you have to leave?" "Because of what Mom did." "No." Mallory frowned. "If you leave because of what she did to me, then you're still making the decision around someone else. Then what am I supposed to do? Figure out whether you're done performing." She stared at me. I continued, "If you want to keep working there because the job is still worth it to you, then own that. If you want to leave because you can't keep selling a version of your life that isn't real, own that too. But don't resign because you think it buys forgiveness from me." Mallory's eyes filled again. "You really won't make this easy." "No." "Would you forgive me if I left?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you not to do." She looked down. I softened my voice. "I don't know what our relationship looks like after this." "That's honest." "Yes." "Do you want one?" I thought about it. "Eventually, maybe." Mallory nodded, accepting more than agreeing. We stayed another 20 minutes, but the conversation shifted after that. Not lighter exactly, just less strategic. Mallory told me Cole had moved most of his things out months earlier. She admitted she had kept posting old photos because new ones were harder to fake without him. She said Mom had suggested a renewal narrative before the resort campaign ever took shape. Something about showing clients that real marriages had difficult seasons. I did not ask for every detail. I already understood the mechanism. At one point, Mallory pulled out her phone. "I have messages from Mom." I looked at the screen but did not reach for it. "What kind?" "Mostly reminders, things she told me about the trip. About Dad, about Cole." "Keep them." "You don't want screenshots?" "Not unless I need them." She looked confused. "I thought you wanted proof." "I want the truth. They're not always the same job." That sounded more philosophical than I intended. But it was accurate. For the resort, documentary evidence mattered. For my relationship with Mallory, her willingness to say what she had done mattered more. We left the coffee shop separately. I did not hug her. She did not ask me to. That felt healthier than forcing some emotional gesture neither of us had earned yet. I was halfway home when my phone started ringing. "Mom." I let it ring out. She called again. Then again. The fourth call came while I was stopped at a red light. I declined it. A text arrived immediately. "Where are you?" I ignored it. Then, "Are you with your sister?" I did not answer. By the time I got home, there were 6 missed calls and 4 messages. Adam was already there. He took one look at me. "How did it go?" She told the truth. "All of it?" "Enough." I told him about the different versions. About Mom telling Dad I was not attached to Maui. About telling Mallory he understood. About telling Cole the trip had been offered. About Mallory admitting again that she knew I had never said yes. Adam leaned against the kitchen counter. "So your mom distributed the lie." I looked at him. "That's exactly what she did." He frowned. "I didn't mean it like a technical term." "I know. But no one had the whole false story." "No." Which means no one person could easily contradict it until everyone compared notes. "Exactly." I thought about how elegant it was in the worst possible way. Mom had not needed everyone to believe the same thing. She only needed everyone to believe enough. My phone buzzed again. Not a call this time. An email. The subject line appeared on the lock screen. What you are doing to this family. Adam read it over my shoulder. You opening that? Not yet. He raised an eyebrow. Why? Because we're eating dinner. He smiled. I put the phone face down. That choice felt small, but I noticed it. A month earlier, an email like that would have controlled the next 2 hours. I would have opened it immediately, read every accusation, drafted 3 responses, deleted them, and eventually sent something so careful that Mom could interpret it however she wanted. Instead, Adam and I ate. We talked about work. We argued mildly about whether the leftovers in the refrigerator were still safe. We cleaned the kitchen. Only afterward did I sit on the couch with the laptop and open the email. It was long. My mother started by saying she could not believe I had pulled Mallory into a private business issue. Then she accused me of turning Cole against my sister, humiliating Dad, undermining years of work, and presenting a complicated family decision to the resort as if it had been some deliberate scheme. I read without replying. Halfway through, the tone changed. She stopped accusing and started explaining. That was when the email became important. She wrote that Mallory's marriage had been collapsing, the business was under enormous pressure, and Dad had put more of his retirement at risk than I understood. She said everyone had been desperate to avoid another failure at the same time. Then came the sentence that made me sit forward. We all knew you would be angry, but we also knew you would never let Mallory lose everything over one trip. I read it again. Adam was sitting at the other end of the couch. What? I turned the screen toward him. He read the sentence. Then he looked at me. My mother had spent weeks calling the situation a misunderstanding. But misunderstandings require people to believe the wrong thing. That sentence said something else. They knew I would be angry, because they knew I had not agreed. They just thought anger was temporary. They thought I would give in. I read my mother's email 3 times before I understood why it bothered me more than anything she had said on the phone. Over the phone, Diane could retreat. She could tell me I had misunderstood her tone, that I was focusing on the wrong phrase, that she had been emotional and had not meant something literally. An email was different. She had chosen the words, typed them, reread at least some of them, and pressed send because she believed the explanation helped her. It did not. The first half was accusation. According to Mom, I had allowed a private family problem to become a business crisis. I had encouraged Mallory to question her place in the company, given Cole an excuse to walk away from his marriage, and made Dad feel ashamed for trying to protect what he and Mom had spent decades building. She accused me of presenting the resort with an incomplete version of events, and then standing aside while they treated Ever After Whitaker as though it had intentionally misused a client's reservation. Then she tried to explain why they had done it. Mallory's marriage was failing. Ever After had been losing bookings. Dad had put retirement money into keeping the business stable. The resort opportunity might have created enough referral work to stop the bleeding. Mom wrote that she had been carrying all of those problems at once while I was preparing for a wedding, and that she had tried not to burden me with them because, in her words, I deserved to enjoy something good. That sentence almost impressed me. She had managed to describe hiding a plan involving my own honeymoon as protecting me from stress. Then came the paragraph I had already shown Adam. We all knew you would be angry, but we also knew you would never let Mallory lose everything over one trip. You have always been the one who could see the bigger picture once the emotion passed. We moved forward because there wasn't time to wait for everyone to feel comfortable, and I believe that once you understood what was at stake, you would help us make it work. I read those lines slowly, not because they surprised me anymore, because they clarified everything. Mom did not write that she thought I had agreed. She wrote that she expected me to agree later. She did not write that my permission had been misunderstood. She wrote that there had not been time to wait for everyone to feel comfortable. She did not deny moving forward before I said yes. She justified it. Adam was still sitting beside me on the couch. Keep reading, I said. He did. The next paragraph was worse. Mom said she had assumed Dad could help with the travel details because I had voluntarily sent them to my parents. She described the itinerary as information already shared within the family. She said Mallory knew the arrangements were still being finalized, and that Cole had been told enough to understand the general purpose of the trip. She insisted no one intended to deprive Adam and me of anything permanently because we had the financial flexibility to make alternate plans. I pointed at that sentence. That's the whole thing. Adam nodded. She still thinks the problem was whether you could afford another trip, not whether she had the right to reassign this one. Right. The final paragraph returned to the statement she wanted me to sign. If I would confirm that this had been a family arrangement handled badly under pressure, Mom believed the resort might reconsider. She said she was not asking me to lie. She was asking me to provide context. I closed the laptop. For about 30 seconds, I wanted to forward the email to everyone. Not the resort. Everyone. My aunt. My cousins. Dad. Mallory. Cole. The relatives who had heard that I was refusing to fix a misunderstanding. The people who might have looked at me and wondered why I was willing to let a family business suffer over a honeymoon I had already taken. The impulse was so strong that I opened a new email and started adding names. Adam watched without saying anything. I stopped when I reached my aunt. What? He asked. I want them to see it. Okay. That's all you're going to say? What do you want me to say? Tell me it's a bad idea. He leaned back. Do you think it's a bad idea? Yes. Then why do you need me to tell you? I hated that answer because it worked. I looked at the recipient list. If I sent Mom's email to the family, it would feel good for maybe 10 minutes. Everyone would know I had not invented the lack of consent. Everyone would see how she justified the plan, but it would also turn the story into a public contest, and I knew exactly what would happen next. Mom would send her response. Dad would explain the financial context. Mallory's separation would become family entertainment. Cole would get dragged into conversations he had never asked for. Every relative would become a judge. And none of that was necessary to protect me. I deleted the draft. Adam said, Feel better? No. Good decision anyway? I think so. That was something I had been learning. Good decisions did not always arrive with satisfying emotions attached. The resort was different. They had an active review. They had specifically asked whether I had authorized the use of my reservation. My mother's email directly addressed that issue, even though she had not intended it to. I forwarded the email only to Claire and the marketing coordinator. I wrote one sentence above it. This email is relevant to your question about whether I authorized the arrangement described in your review. Nothing else. I did not highlight passages. I did not tell them what conclusion to reach. I did not add that Mom was manipulative or that Dad had admitted giving her the PDF. They already had the reservation record, my statement, Cole's clarification, and their own dates. They could read. Then I closed my laptop. For the next 2 days, nothing happened. That surprised me more than it should have. I had become accustomed to my family's rhythm, where every revelation was followed immediately by another call, another accusation, another request that something be solved before dinner. The resort did not operate that way. They reviewed documents. They spoke internally. They responded when they had made a decision. Mom called twice during those 2 days. I answered once. Did you send my email to them? She asked. Yes. You forwarded a private email? It directly addressed whether I had agreed. It was written to you. And I sent it to the people you were asking me to tell a different version to. Her breathing changed. Do you have any idea what you've done? I sent them your explanation. You sent it without context. The email was the context. You know what I meant. I know what you wrote. She went quiet. Then she said, I cannot believe you would use something I wrote as your mother against me professionally. I didn't use it against you. Then what do you call this? Answering their question. You could have told them I acted in good faith. I don't know that. How many times are you going to say that? Until you stop asking me to certify what's inside your head. Mom made a frustrated sound. You think you're being clever. No. You've always done this. You hide behind facts so you don't have to admit you're hurting people. That landed, partly because it touched something true. I did use facts when emotions became messy. Sometimes too much. I had spent years believing the person who could explain something most cleanly was probably the person thinking most clearly. But this was not one of those times. I'm sure this is hurting you, I said. That's not enough. What would be enough? Fixing it. By saying I agreed when I didn't? By saying you understood. I didn't. You do now. Understanding why you did something after the fact doesn't make it authorized before the fact. She went silent. There was nothing left to argue about. I ended the call without waiting for the next accusation. The resort emailed me late that Friday afternoon. I was still at work. Claire thanked me for providing the clarification and said their review was complete. The resort had decided not to continue partnership discussions with Ever After Whitaker and would not move the company forward in its preferred planner evaluation. The decision was based on concerns about authorization, representation of guest arrangements, and the breakdown of trust during the proposed trial. There was no threat of legal action, no demand for repayment, no dramatic language, just a business decision. They were done. I read the email once, then closed it. My first feeling was relief. My second was dread because I knew my mother would receive her version of the same message. She did not call immediately. Dad did. I stepped into an empty conference room and answered. It's over, he said. The resort partnership? Yes. I'm sorry. He gave a hollow laugh. Are you? About the money? Yes. Not about what you did? I looked through the glass wall at my coworkers moving through the hallway. Dad, I didn't decide whether the resort trusted Mom. You gave them the email. They asked whether I authorized the plan. You could have answered without sending that. I already had. And then you gave them more. Because Mom's email directly contradicted the idea that this was a misunderstanding. He was quiet. I continued. She wrote that you all expected me to be angry and give in. Dad said nothing. Did she speak for you accurately? That question changed the call. I never said it like that. That's not what I asked. He sighed. I believed you would help once you knew how serious things were. So yes, I didn't think of it as forcing you. I know. I thought you would choose the family. I did choose my family. He scoffed. I chose Adam. I chose the marriage I had just entered. I chose not to begin it by letting everyone else decide our honeymoon was available because they needed it more. That's not what I meant. I know what you meant. He was silent for several seconds. Then his voice changed. Not defensive. Tired. I told Diane this morning I'm not putting any more money into the company. I sat down. What? I can't. There was no triumph in his voice. Just exhaustion. We've already adjusted too much, he said. I kept telling myself one good season would make the losses temporary. Then it was the next season. Then this resort partnership. Does Mom know? Yes. How did she take it? You know your mother. I almost corrected him. Then decided not to. Are you okay? It was a strange question after everything between us. But he was still my father. I'm not losing the house tomorrow, Aaron. I didn't ask that. No. We're not in some disaster. But retirement is going to look different than I planned. That mattered. It also helped restore proportion. Dad was not going to be homeless because of me. He was not facing some cinematic financial collapse, Sanjal-saction. He had made decisions that reduced his cushion and increased his obligations. Now he had to stop. I'm sorry, I said. This time he did not accuse me of insincerity. I know. He sounded older again. Then he said, I wish you'd told me to stop sooner. The sentence almost made me angry. I caught it before it came out. Dad, I didn't know. I know. You kept the problem from me. I know. So don't make me responsible for not solving something you didn't tell me existed. He exhaled. Fair. It might have been the first time he had used that word without following it with but. We ended the call quietly. The next consequence came from somewhere I had not expected, but it did not arrive magically. One of Ever After Whitaker's long-term co-marketing partners had also been involved in producing materials for the proposed resort campaign. Their team had been asked weeks earlier to prepare design assets using the Mallory and Cole concept, which meant they had their own communications from Mom and their own concerns once the project disappeared. They did not contact me. Mallory told me. She texted the next morning. They suspended the co-marketing agreement. I stared at the message. Why? She replied. They asked Mom for the releases and approvals behind the campaign because the resort killed it. She couldn't provide what they expected. That made sense. Not because the whole industry had somehow heard about our family drama, because a company already involved in the campaign looked at its own risk once the campaign collapsed. I wrote back, "Are you okay?" Mallory took several minutes to answer. "No." Then, "But I'm leaving." I called her. She answered immediately. "You mean leaving the company?" "Yes." "When?" I told Mom this morning. I sat on the edge of my bed. It was Saturday, and Adam was downstairs making coffee. "What happened?" "The resort walked. Dad stopped funding. The co-marketing partner froze their agreement. Mom wants to rebuild the campaign around something else." "With you?" "She said we need to control the narrative." I closed my eyes. "Of course she did. What did you say?" "I said there isn't a narrative anymore. Cole and I are separated. I'm done pretending we're not." I waited. Mallory laughed weakly. "You can say it." "Say what?" "That I should have done this 5 months ago." "I wasn't going to." "You were thinking it." "I was." "Say? That doesn't mean saying it helps." She was quiet. Then she said, "I don't have another job." "You'll find one." "You sound very confident for someone who told me not to leave for your forgiveness." "I still mean that." "I know. Do you want to leave?" "Yes." "Then that's enough." Mallory started crying. Not the frantic crying I had heard on Maui. Something quieter. "I don't know who I am without it. You don't have to know this week." She laughed through the tears. That was almost comforting. "Don't get used to it." We both laughed then, and the moment felt strange because the damage between us was still there. I had not forgiven her. She had not repaired what she had done. But for the first time, we were speaking without Mom standing invisibly between every sentence. Mallory told me she would finish whatever administrative transition she actually owed the company, but she was no longer appearing in campaigns, posing with Cole, or presenting her marriage as part of Ever After Whitaker's brand. I did not congratulate her. I did not tell her I was proud. That decision belonged to her. Before we hung up, she said, "Mom thinks you made me do this." "I know." I told her you didn't. "Thank you." She doesn't believe me. That's her problem. After the call, I went downstairs. Adam handed me coffee. Mallory resigned. He looked surprised. "Because of you?" "No." "Good answer." She says because she's done performing. Better answer. I took the mug. "Does this count as everything falling apart?" Adam considered the question. "No." "What does it count as?" "People finally stopping the same thing." I thought about that for the rest of the day. Mom had spent weeks warning that if I refused to cooperate, everything would collapse. But the company still existed. Dad still had retirement savings, just less flexibility than he wanted. Mallory was still employed through her transition period and capable of finding another job. Cole was still separated, exactly as he had been before my wedding. The disaster Mom had predicted was not actually destruction. It was loss of control. She could no longer use Dad's money indefinitely. She could no longer use Mallory's marriage indefinitely. She could no longer use my honeymoon. That evening, Mom called. I almost did not answer. Then I did, because I suspected we were finally reaching the end of the argument. She did not say hello. "Are you happy now?" Her voice was flat. "No." "Don't leave." "I'm not. The resort is gone. The co-marketing agreement is suspended. Your father won't put another dollar into the company. Your sister resigned this morning." "I know. And you're telling me you aren't happy?" "No." "Then why did you do this?" The question was almost shouted. I could have answered with the whole history. The cake, the PDF, the resort notes, the photographer, the proposal, the lies to Cole, the half-truths to Mallory, Dad's admission, the statement she wanted me to sign. Instead, I gave her the only answer that still mattered. "I didn't do this to you. I stopped letting you do it through me." She went silent. Then she said, "We're your family." I closed my eyes. "That was why you thought I'd never say no." She started talking again, but I did not listen long enough to hear the next argument. I ended the call. For the first time since the wedding, I did not feel guilty after hanging up. I felt finished. 2 days later, an email arrived from our videographer. I had almost forgotten about him. The subject line said our unedited camera archive was ready. Adam and I had paid for it months earlier, and the delivery schedule had nothing to do with what was happening now. The timing was coincidence, not some last-minute rescue. I opened the download page after dinner. There were hundreds of clips. Getting ready, guests arriving, the ceremony, cocktail hour, dinner, dancing. I scrolled past most of them. Then I saw a thumbnail from the cake table. Mallory was standing near the edge of the frame. My mother was beside the videographer. I remembered hearing her tell him to get Mallory in frame first. At the time, I had thought she was just being controlling. I clicked the video, and before Mallory ever touched the knife, I heard my mother's voice. "Get Mallory in frame first," my mother said on the video. Her voice came from somewhere just outside the camera's view, slightly muffled by music and conversations around the cake table, but there was no mistaking it. The videographer adjusted his angle. Mallory stepped closer to the cake. Then Mom said something quieter. "This sister moment will cut nicely with the resort material." I stopped the video. Adam sat beside me on the couch, looking at the frozen frame on the television. Mallory was standing beside my wedding cake. My mother was partly visible near the edge, and I was several feet away talking to one of Adam's relatives. If I had watched that clip the week after my wedding without knowing anything else, I probably would have dismissed Mom's comment as another attempt to direct a vendor who did not work for her. Now I understood exactly what she meant. Adam picked up the remote and replayed those few seconds. We heard the same words again. There was no confession. Mom did not explain the partnership, mention my reservation, or announce that she intended to put Mallory and Cole into my honeymoon. The footage would not suddenly change the resort's decision or prove something their own records had failed to show. But emotionally, it answered the question that had been sitting underneath everything since the wedding. Mallory cutting my cake had not been random. Mom wanted her on camera. The resort campaign already existed. She already knew Mallory and Cole were supposed to be the couple at the center of it. She had already decided my honeymoon could supply the suite, airport transfer, private dinner, and production setting. At my wedding, she was beginning to collect the material that would make the story look seamless. The first slice was not just favoritism. It was the first shot. Adam muted the television. "You want to send this to Claire?" I thought about it longer than I expected. A few weeks earlier, I would have sent it immediately. Not because the resort needed it, but because I would have wanted one more piece of evidence sitting on top of all the others. One more thing Mom could not explain away. One more chance to prove that I had been right. But the partnership review was over. The resort had already seen its own reservation records, the proposal dates, my written clarification, Cole's account, and finally Mom's email admitting that she knew I would be angry but expected me to give in. The company had lost the partnership. The result was not going to change because I provided another clip. "No," I said. Adam looked at me. "You're sure?" "Yes. You don't think they should have it for their file? If they ask for it, I'll decide then. But I'm not sending it just because I can." He nodded. I looked at him. "You don't think I'm letting her off?" "No." "Why?" "Because you already stopped her. This would just be another hit." I leaned back against the couch. That distinction mattered to me. My family had spent weeks describing every boundary I set as an attack. If I kept my honeymoon, I was hurting Mallory. If I told the resort the truth, I was hurting Mom. If I refused to sign a false statement, I was hurting Dad. They had trained themselves to see any consequence they disliked as evidence that I was being cruel. But I did not have to prove the opposite by becoming endlessly forgiving either. I could stop when the purpose of the action was finished. I watched the rest of the cake clip once. Mallory made the cut. Mom smiled. Dad stepped closer and said, "Don't make a scene." Then I walked forward, took the knife, and cut the next slice with Adam. That part made me smile. Even before I understood what they were doing, I had taken the moment back. I closed the archive. A few days later, Dad asked if he could come over. He arrived alone. That was the first thing I noticed. Most difficult conversations with my father had eventually acquired my mother. Sometimes she entered the room. Sometimes he called her. Sometimes he carried the conversation home and returned the next day with a revised version of what he had supposedly meant. This time, he sat at my kitchen table and put his phone face down beside his coffee. "I met with our financial advisor," he said. I waited. "We're okay. I'm glad." His mouth tightened slightly. "Not as okay as I thought we'd be." I did not fill the silence. He continued. "Stopping the business funding changes some things. Less travel for a while. Some retirement plans get pushed back. We'll have to watch discretionary spending more carefully. There was no mansion being repossessed. No dramatic foreclosure. No sudden poverty. Dad had not lost everything. He had lost flexibility. And at 66, that mattered. I kept telling myself the money wasn't really lost," he said. "It was invested. One strong season and the business would repay some of it. And then the next season became the one that was supposed to fix everything." He looked at me. Yes, I understood the trap better than I had at the beginning. Dad had not handed Mom my itinerary because he woke up one morning and decided my honeymoon belonged to Mallory. He had spent 2 years feeding money into a business he loved, partly because his wife had built it, and partly because admitting it was shrinking would force him to acknowledge that some of his retirement savings were not coming back. The resort partnership had offered him something almost more important than profit: vindication. If it worked, he could tell himself every previous decision had been wise. "I shouldn't have given your mother the PDF," he said. It was the first time he had said it without an explanation immediately following. "No, I knew you hadn't agreed." "Yes, I thought you would." "I know." He looked down at the table. "I didn't understand how bad that sounds until I said it to you." I almost told him it sounded exactly as bad as it was. Instead, I let him keep talking. "I convinced myself there was a difference between planning ahead and taking something from you." "There is." He looked up. "Planning ahead means you ask me before the plan depends on my answer." Dad nodded. "I know that now." I took a sip of coffee. He rubbed both hands over his face. "I also owe you an apology for the wedding." "The cake?" "For telling you not to make a scene." That apology surprised me more than the one about the PDF. "I knew your mother had something arranged around Maui," he continued. "I knew Mallory and Cole were supposed to travel. I knew none of it had been explained to you yet. When Mallory cut the cake, I saw you getting angry, and my first thought was that if you reacted publicly, people would start asking questions. About Mallory and Cole." "Yes." "And about the resort." "Yes." "So you weren't protecting my wedding." "No." It hurt, but I appreciated the clean answer. "You were protecting Mom." "Yes." "The business." "Yes." "Your investment." He hesitated. Then he said, "Yes." That third yes was the one I needed. My father had spent most of my life describing himself as the person who kept everyone calm. I had accepted that story because, compared with Mom, he was calm. Compared with Mallory, he was predictable. But calm people could still choose sides. They were simply quieter when they did it. "I love you, Dad," I said. His face softened. "But I don't trust you the same way right now." The softness disappeared. I hated hurting him. I said it anyway. "How long is that going to last?" "I don't know." "What am I supposed to do?" "I don't know that either." He looked frustrated. I understood why. Dad liked problems with measurable solutions. Transfer the right amount of money. Make the right call. Repair the right damage. Trust was harder. "I can tell you what not to do," I said. "Don't ask me what single thing gets us back to normal." He looked at me. "I don't want the old normal back." After a moment, he nodded. Before he left, he told me he had explained to Mom that he would not put more money into Ever After Whitaker even if another partnership opportunity appeared. How did she take it? Badly, I assumed. She thinks I'm abandoning her when she needs me most. What do you think? Dad glanced toward the front door. I think helping someone doesn't mean financing every decision they make. I raised an eyebrow. He smiled tiredly. I hear it. That was the first time since the wedding that I hugged him. It did not erase anything. That was what made the hug possible. Mallory's exit from Ever After Whitaker was much less dramatic than Mom later made it sound. She did not quit in the middle of an event or empty her desk into a cardboard box while clients watched. She had projects to hand over, vendor passwords to transfer, design files to organize, and clients who needed new points of contact. For several weeks, she remained technically employed while stepping away from the public side of the company. She stopped appearing in photographs first. Then she stopped attending bridal showcases. Then her profile disappeared from the company's team page. Mom tried several times to turn the resignation into a temporary leave. According to Mallory, she suggested a month off, then a new title, then a role where Mallory could work behind the scenes without discussing her marriage. Mallory refused all of them. I listened when she called me afterward, but I did not coach her. That mattered. I did not want to replace Mom as the person telling Mallory who she should become. Cole remained separated from her. There was no romantic reunion just because Mallory finally admitted the truth. There was also no instant divorce. Their marriage had been deteriorating for longer than I understood, and nothing about my family's resort scheme could resolve that in a few weeks. Mallory told me she and Cole had started having conversations that were more honest than the ones they had while pretending everything was fine. "Does that mean you're getting back together?" I asked once. "I don't know." It was the healthiest answer I had heard from either of them. Near the end of July, Mallory asked to meet at the same coffee shop where we had compared Mom's different stories. She looked better than she had the first time. Not happier exactly, but less like she was waiting for someone to tell her what expression to wear. We talked about ordinary things for a while. Then she put down her cup. "I keep trying to make my part sound better." I waited. I tell myself Mom pressured me. She did. I tell myself the business was failing. It was. I tell myself Cole and I were falling apart. "You were." Mallory nodded. "Those things are true." "Yes. But I still knew you hadn't agreed." I said nothing. I knew Mom hadn't gotten a yes from you. I knew she was counting on you, giving in once everything was arranged. And I went along with it because I wanted the trip, the campaign, the business, all of it to work. Her eyes filled, but she did not look away. I keep trying to explain that part so it sounds less ugly. I can't. I felt something loosen inside me. Not forgiveness, something closer to relief. That is the first version you've given me that doesn't ask Mom to carry your responsibility for you. Mallory swallowed. Is that enough? For what? For you to forgive me. I considered lying to make the moment easier. No. She flinched. I don't know what forgiveness looks like yet. Okay, but this is better. She nodded. A few months earlier, Mallory would have argued. She would have cried harder, reminded me she was my sister, or accused me of holding a grudge. This time she accepted the answer. That mattered more to me than an apology designed to produce immediate forgiveness. By then, Mom's company had begun shrinking. Not collapsing. Shrinking. Ever after, Whitaker still had clients. Mom still knew how to plan weddings. She still had vendor relationships built over more than 20 years. Losing the resort opportunity did not erase her actual professional ability. But the growth plan was gone. Dad had stopped subsidizing shortfalls. Mallory was leaving. The co-marketing company involved in the failed campaign had suspended its agreement after reviewing its own release and authorization requirements. Mom cut expenses. The office lease was approaching renewal, and instead of committing to the same space, she started looking at smaller options. Some contractors received fewer hours. More administrative work moved home. The website changed too. The photographs of Mallory and Cole disappeared. Then the sections built around the Whitaker family love story became smaller. Eventually, the site mostly advertised what the company actually sold: wedding planning, event design, vendor coordination, logistics. I checked it once, and then stopped. There was a poetic justice in that change, but I did not need to watch it happen page by page. My mother had spent years selling her family as proof of her expertise. Now she had to sell the expertise itself. Mom and I spoke rarely. She did not apologize. Once, she said, "I would do things differently if I had another chance." I asked, "Would you ask me first?" She did not answer. That told me more than another argument would have. I stopped waiting for the perfect apology. By early August, Adam and I finally put together our honeymoon album. We had hundreds of photographs, ocean views, sunsets, terrible selfies. A picture of Adam pretending not to regret ordering something much hotter than he could handle. Then I found one from our private dinner. It was objectively not one of the best. No faces were visible. 2 glasses sat on the table. Part of Adam's hand reached into the frame. The ocean behind him was slightly out of focus. Adam looked over my shoulder. That one? Yes. Why? Because nobody arranged it. He smiled. We arranged the dinner. You know what I mean. I looked at the photograph again. No floral initials. No campaign photographer. No couple pose. No story waiting to be sold. Just a moment that belonged to us because we had lived it. We put it near the front of the album. A few days later, I received another email from Mom. I almost ignored it until I saw the subject line. Permission request. I opened it. She was updating the Ever After Whitaker website as the business moved toward a smaller model. She wanted to use an older family photograph taken at my wedding, before the ceremony. Mom, Dad, Mallory, and me. She named the exact image. Then she wrote, "Would you be comfortable with me using this photograph on the About page? If not, I'll choose something else." I read it twice. No guilt. No mention of Dad's money. No reminder that we were family. No claim that the picture belonged to everyone because everyone was standing in it. No assumption. She had asked. That did not undo what happened. It did not make the honeymoon plan harmless, or transform the cake into a funny family story. It did not repair the trust I had lost in Dad, or excuse Mallory's willingness to benefit from something she knew I had never approved. But for the first time in this entire mess, my mother had reached for something connected to my life and stopped before taking it. She had waited for an answer. I placed my hands on the keyboard. I could have said yes. I could have said no. Either answer would have been mine. Then Adam called from the kitchen that dinner was ready. I looked at Mom's email once more and closed the laptop. I would answer when I was ready. Learning to ask was her responsibility. Knowing I was allowed to take my time, answering had finally become mine. When your family expects you to give up what is yours, simply because you are the responsible one, remember that being dependable does not mean being available for exploitation. You can care about someone's marriage, business, finances, or mistakes without allowing those problems to become your responsibility. Consent matters even inside a family. And a favor is only a favor when you freely choose to give it. You also do not have to expose, humiliate, or destroy people to protect yourself. Sometimes, the strongest response is to correct the facts, set a clear boundary, refuse to lie for someone else, and let their own choices create the consequences. If trust has been damaged, you are allowed to rebuild it slowly instead of pretending everything is normal again. Protect your peace without surrendering your judgment. And if you value stories with practical lessons about family, boundaries, and accountability, subscribe to the channel for more.